Chapter 211. Sitting on the warhead of the Dongfeng Express was not a pleasant experience, especially when the nuclear warhead started to accelerate and stabilized at a speed of 6,000 meters per second. During this process, the overload of hundreds of gs of pressure was enough to instantly crush any human into a pile of minced meat. Fortunately, the people sitting on the warhead were not ordinary people. Each of them had their own famed sword-level sword mistresses in their hands. While they enjoyed the physical attributes of a famed sword-level sword mistress, they also had a layer of protective shields protecting them. Only Artoria did not have these protective measures. But this was a piece of cake for her. This little bit of pressure was not enough to pose a threat to a universe-level Yuan Ku. The only one who looked a little terrible was Guhan himself. To be honest, Guhan was very uncomfortable. He felt as if a train was pressing down on him, and his lungs were about to be flattened. It could not be helped. After all, Guhan's sword essence was only about 4,500 quarks. The strength of his protective shield was far weaker than those around him who easily had more than 100,000 quarks of sword essence. What was more frightening was that Guhan found that the energy of his protective shield was decreasing at an alarming rate. In less than 3 seconds, 40% of the shield's energy had been consumed. Why was this happening? The reason was simple. The shield would lose energy when it received damage. In a way, Guhan, who was under 100 times the gravity, felt as if someone was constantly hammering his chest with a 10-ton sledgehammer, or as if he was constantly enduring a full-force blow from a dragon-level Yuan Ku. Under such circumstances, it would be strange if the energy of Guhan's protective shield did not decrease. Who would have thought that all my calculations would fail at this step? Seeing this situation, Guhan sighed in his heart. He had calculated everything except for the fact that under such high-speed gravity, his protective shield might not even last 10 seconds, let alone 200 seconds. Once the protective shield broke, he would be dead. There was no other possibility. What was even more frightening was that Guhan could not even open his mouth. If he could not open his mouth, he would not be able to ask for help from the people around him. Guhan would probably suffocate to death inside the warhead. "Are you okay?" At this critical moment, Artoria, who was squeezed behind Guhan, noticed Guhan's abnormality. She was surprised to find that the leader who had saved everyone at this critical moment was pale, full of pain and fear, like a critically ill patient who could die at any moment. Guhan tried his best to stretch out a hand and place it on his chest. Only then did Artoria notice that Guhan's chest had almost been squashed into a pizza, from a bloated hamburger to a pizza. Artoria instantly realized that this person's body couldn't withstand such a strong gravity. But Artoria couldn't understand why this leader couldn't withstand it even though his other teammates looked pale. They all seemed to be able to withstand it, so why couldn't he? Although she couldn't understand it, one thing was clear: Artoria had to save this man. It was this man who had saved her from danger and suffering. She had to save him. But at this moment, how could she save this man whose chest was flattened by the pressure of the atmosphere? Suddenly, Artoria thought of a balloon. As long as she blew this man's body up like a balloon, it would be fine. But if she blew on him, wouldn't that be? For no reason at all, Artoria's face turned red. As soon as Artoria had this thought, ripples appeared on the surface of Guhan's body, which meant that his protective shield had broken. If she didn't act now, Guhan would die. She couldn't delay any longer. Artoria decisively pulled Guhan into her arms, then turned his head so that Guhan's lips were facing her face. "I'm repaying a debt of gratitude," Artoria told herself. Then, she instantly lowered her head and pressed her lips against Guhan's. Then, she used her tongue to pry Guhan's lips open. She took a deep breath, inhaled a large amount of air, and suddenly exhaled, pouring a large mouthful of air into Guhan's mouth. Then, through the airway, it rushed directly into Guhan's lungs. The force of Artoria's full breath was no less than that of an air compressor. Artoria's breath instantly inflated his lungs, which had been pressed together from top to bottom, so that the atmospheric pressure inside and outside Guhan's body became balanced. Suddenly, Guhan's pale face became a little ruddy, and he looked a lot better. But this was completely dependent on Artoria's help. Once Artoria loosened her mouth, Guhan would probably return to his previous state, or even worse. This meant that he couldn't loosen his mouth for a long time. Muddle-head Guhan felt a clear stream flowing from his lips into his brain. He opened his eyes and saw that Artoria's face was so close to his own, and her beautiful eyes were less than a finger's distance away from his own eyes. The two people's eyes met, and in Artoria's eyes, Guhan could see the stars, the moon, the tall and supreme throne, the battlefield littered with corpses, and the pain of not being able to live as she wished. In that instant, Guhan understood many things from Artoria's eyes. As if sensing that her heart had been seen through by Guhan, Artoria hurriedly closed her eyes, and a few traces of red flashed across her face. Wow, military governor, you're too awesome. You've already started kissing? Military governor, you're too awesome. At this time, Gunrun discovered the unusually intimate action between Guhan and Artoria, and let out an envious sigh. This military governor was really amazing. Not only was he a first-class player in clearing dungeons, but he was also many times better at picking up girls than Gunrun. Gunrun couldn't help but admire him. Good brother. I want a kiss too. Yu Sikong and Yu Siyu, who were squeezed in the innermost area, saw this scene. The younger sister couldn't help but pout coquettishly. Then, the older brother Yu Sikong very considerately pressed his lips against his sister's lips. The two of them also started kissing passionately without restraint. Adulterous couple, shameless and shameless. The ashen-faced Hong Yu suddenly blurted out such a sentence. No one knew if she was talking about the Yu siblings or Guhan and Artoria. Sister Hong Yu, why don't the two of us do that too? You see, I'm also an unyielding man. Gunrun shamelessly moved his head to Hong Yu's side, but in return, Hong Yu slapped him on the neck. Get lost. After maintaining contact with Guhan's mouth for dozens of seconds, Artoria, whose mind was a mess, suddenly remembered something. She pushed Guhan away, took the sword of the lake's scabbard from her body, and stuffed it into Guhan's arms. The next moment, a light barrier enveloped the entire space of 1 square meter, and the hundreds of times the gravity instantly disappeared. The high-speed flying rocket was as leisurely as a car. Phew, I almost forgot that my scabbard has this function. Artoria blushed. Her sword of the lake scabbard was a scabbard made by the elves, and it could form a space-stabilizing boundary to protect life within the boundary. Artoria's mind was a mess just now, and she actually forgot that her scabbard had this function. Guhan touched his lips regretfully, and then glanced at his personal terminal. Just now, Guhan felt a message being sent to his terminal, but because of the gravity, he didn't have the strength to notice it. Only now did he have the time to look at it. System notification. Respected player military governor, your team has successfully killed the universe-level Nazi King Yuan Ku. Congratulations on completing this almost impossible mission. Wait, the Nazi King is dead. What's going on? Is this an April Fool's joke? When Gunrun, the Yu siblings, and the others saw this mission notification, they couldn't understand it either. How could the Nazi King die? They had clearly escaped, and they hadn't even touched a single hair of the Nazi King. Military governor, did you do something? Did you? Now, whenever something inexplicable happened, Gunrun and the others would habitually think that it was Guhan's doing. In fact, it was mostly Guhan's doing. I don't know. Guhan also scratched his head in confusion. Although I set all the remaining 20 normal nuclear warheads to explode at the same time before I left, I don't think that would kill the Nazi King. After all, weapons of pure human civilization are useless against Yuan Ku. You lunatic, you actually set the remaining 20 nuclear warheads to explode at the same time. When Gunrun heard Guhan's words, he almost peed his pants. Gunrun thought that he was already very powerful, but he never imagined that he would meet someone even more powerful. This was 20 nuclear warheads exploding at the same time. The power was enough to destroy the entire Shaanxi province, and then blast a whole thousands of meters deep into the earth. How could this guy have the guts to do such a thing? Compared to Guhan, Gunrun suddenly felt that he was as ridiculous and insignificant as a primary school student. I didn't want to, but the hacker yesterday said that this was the side effect of forcefully breaking the security system. Unless I spend an hour to completely break the security system, that's obviously impossible, so I can only let the remaining nuclear warheads explode at the same time. Guhan explained very seriously. But obviously, Gunrun and the others didn't agree with this explanation. From Gunrun's point of view, Guhan had obviously set the nuclear warheads to explode after a certain number of seconds. Otherwise, why didn't the nuclear warheads around him explode? Since it was a counterattack by the security system, all the nuclear warheads should have exploded at the same time. As he said this, Gunrun couldn't help but touch the metal shell of the hydrogen bomb beside him. This was a hydrogen bomb with a yield of 1 million tons, and it felt great to touch. The Nazi king couldn't have been killed by a nuclear warhead. Weapons of pure human civilization don't work on us. Even if there were 200 of them, they wouldn't be able to kill the Nazi king, let alone 20. What did you do to kill the Nazi king? Artoria stared into Guhan's eyes. She had to figure this out, or she wouldn't be able to eat or sleep. Well, maybe it has something to do with the Chengying sword. Guhan thought for a moment and came up with a more reliable explanation. When I left, I saw the Chengying sword in the Nazi king's hand. I think the powerful shockwave must have hit the Chengying sword during the explosion, allowing the Chengying sword to pierce through the armor of the Third Reich and stab the Nazi king. At that time, the Nazi king was in his minimized mecha form, and without the Third Reich, Hitler was just an ordinary person. Once Hitler was stabbed, no matter how powerful the Third Reich was, it would be useless. This was the only possible explanation. In fact, Guhan also couldn't understand why the Nazi king would die there. It didn't make sense. Chapter 212. Get ready for my command. When I say jump, everyone jump down hand in hand with me. We must do it within 2 seconds. That's a distance of 12,000 meters. Do you hear me? Guhan ordered his team members. According to Guhan's settings, this nuclear warhead would fly over the sky of Yangjing City and not land near Yangjing City. If it caused a nuclear explosion near Yangjing City, it would be over. The vicinity of Yangjing City was not as uninhabited as the vicinity of Xianyang Airport, where there were no traces of people. There were tens of thousands of ordinary people working around Beijing City, as well as thousands of swordsmen patrolling and killing Yuan Ku. If it exploded near Beijing City, the number of NPCs killed would be estimated to be tens of thousands. At that time, Guhan's mission rating would definitely not reach S rank. Therefore, according to Guhan's settings, the nuclear bomb would fly over Beijing City and land on a city in Nihan. After all, that city had suffered a nuclear explosion 1,000 years ago. It was better to go back to the original place and return to its original state. According to Guhan's calculations, the best landing spot over Beijing City was between 202.3 seconds and 205 seconds. Based on the calculation of inertia, the final landing spot was right above Miyun Reservoir. Without a parachute, jumping into the water was obviously the best landing spot. With the physical fitness of the swordsman and the water as a buffer, even if they fell from a height of tens of thousands of meters, it was still possible for them to survive. Guhan stared closely at the time displayed by the system. When the time passed 202 seconds, Guhan immediately shouted, "Jump!" He grabbed Artoria's little hand and jumped down from the hole. They jumped down from an object flying at a high speed of 6,000 meters per second, almost 20 times the speed of sound. Artoria held Hongyu's hand, Hongyu held Steel Centipede's hand, Steel Centipede held Yu Xizong's hand, and Yu Xikong held her sister's hand. The 6 of them jumped down like a centipede. The experience of jumping from tens of thousands of meters in the air was very magical. The high-speed friction between their bodies and the atmosphere quickly raised the surface temperature of their bodies to over 100 degrees. Fortunately, they had their personal shields, or else Guhan and the others would have been burned into a pile of charcoal. The 6 of them couldn't hold hands for long in the sky. Soon, Hongyu let go of the Steel Centipede, and the Yu siblings also let go of the Steel Centipede. The original team of 6 was divided into 3 groups, and they quickly distanced themselves from each other. In the end, they landed several kilometers away from each other. The clouds in the sky gradually dissipated, and a large lake appeared in front of Guhan's eyes. This was the Miyun Reservoir that had once supplied the entire Yangjing city with drinking water. It was still the reservoir that supplied the entire Yangjing city, and the new Yangjing base city still relied on the Miyun Reservoir for its water supply. Zhu Qingfeng was the commander of the entire Miyun Reservoir, and he was in charge of the 108 swordbearers guarding the Miyun Reservoir. Because the Miyun Reservoir was related to the drinking water safety of the tens of millions of people in the Yangjing base city, the Yangjing base city had always placed a large number of soldiers and experts in the Miyun Reservoir to prevent the city's water source from being destroyed. As the commander of the entire Miyun Reservoir, Zhu Qingfeng was an immortal sword-tier swordbearer, and he had 3 spirit sword-tier swordbearers under him. With this kind of strength, even if he were to face the attack of a run-level Yuan Ku, he could rely on the nearby defensive facilities to resist for more than 10 minutes, ensuring that these swordbearers could safely retreat. Yuan Ku was also very wise to not provoke the Miyun Reservoir. Who would have the time to find trouble with an immortal sword-tier swordbearer? Suddenly, a subordinate ran out and reported to Zhu Qingfeng with a strange expression, "Commander, there's something that you'd better come out and take a look at." Seeing the strange expression on his subordinate's face, Zhu Qingfeng also felt that it was very strange. Thus, when he walked out, he saw a few swordbearers walking over with a man and a woman dripping wet. "Everyone on guard. Release the sword maidens. Prepare to attack." Once he saw who it was, Zhu Qingfeng's hair stood on end, and he immediately ordered the surrounding swordbearers to be on guard and prepare to attack. As an immortal sword-tier swordbearer, how could he not recognize King Arthur Artoria, one of the 10 kings of the Martyr's Palace? In fact, Zhu Qingfeng had fought with Artoria once before. If he hadn't escaped quickly, he would have probably died at Artoria's hands. "Long time no see, King Arthur. You actually have the guts to come here. Do you think you can block the attacks of 108 of us alone?" Zhu Qingfeng shouted. He really couldn't understand why King Arthur would suddenly come here, and it seemed like he had fallen into the water. What? This person is actually King Arthur. King Arthur was famous, and the surrounding swordbearers had never imagined that they would save a Yun-level Yuan Ku. They were so scared that their hair stood on end. They released their sword maidens and waited for Zhu Qingfeng's order to surround and attack Artoria. "Wait, Senior Qingfeng, we have no ill intentions. This King Arthur is no longer Yuan Ku. She is already a human, and she is now on our side. She is here to abandon the dark and seek the light. In fact, we just escaped from the Nazi king's pursuit. Senior Qingfeng, I am a famous swordbearer in Yangjing City. I would never lie to you. Abandon the dark and seek the light." Zhu Qingfeng seemed to have heard a very funny joke. In this day and age, he would rather believe that pigs could climb trees than believe that Yuan Ku would abandon the dark and seek the light, especially a Yuan Ku like King Arthur. "Temph, I think you must have been bewitched by Yuan Ku. Everyone, listen to my command. Let's attack together and kill this King Arthur." Zhu Qingfeng was about to give the order to attack. "Stop!" Guhan suddenly shouted, causing Zhu Qingfeng's words to be stuck in his throat. "Senior Qingfeng, please give me 5 seconds. I can prove that we have no ill intentions." After saying that, Guhan walked to Artoria's side and whispered in her ear, "Let me borrow your Sword of the Lake." Then, he took Artoria's Sword of the Lake and threw it to Zhu Qingfeng, who was watching in a daze. Zhu Qingfeng subconsciously caught the Sword of the Lake. "Senior Qingfeng, King Arthur's Sword of the Lake has been handed over to you. Without the Sword of the Lake, King Arthur's combat power is not even at the U level. Now, you can believe our sincerity, right?" Guhan was right. It was as if all the swordbearers' combat power was on their sword lady. Night King Artoria's combat power was also on her Sword of the Lake. Without the Sword of the Lake, Artoria's combat power was not even at the nether level, let alone the U-level Yuan Ku. Her strength had dropped by more than 2 levels. Is this really the Sword of the Lake? Zhu Qingfeng touched the Sword of the Lake in his hand in disbelief. Suddenly, a woman who looked like clear water walked out from behind him. She was Zhu Qingfeng's immortal sword lady. "Dear friend, this is the Sword of the Lake. She was the one who fought with me last time. I remember her aura. It's the real Sword of the Lake." Seeing that the immortal sword lady had taken the initiative to take the blame, Guhan was overjoyed and immediately said, "Senior Qingfeng, you can contact the higher-ups in Beijing. The higher-ups know about our operation, and they were the ones who ordered us to save King Arthur. As long as you tell them that King Arthur, Artoria, was rescued by the military governor's team, they will know. This. Zhu Qingfeng looked at Guhan suspiciously. Then, he took out a communication device from his waist and dialed the Beijing base's communication channel. After some careful communication, Zhu Qingfeng finally put down the communication device, looked at Guhan, and nodded. It's been hard on you, brave sword-bearers. You have rescued King Arthur, and you are the heroes of humanity. The humans will remember your contributions. Zhu Qingfeng was one of the higher-ups of humanity, so it was easy for him to say such encouraging words. In fact, 300 years later, no one remembered who the famous sword-bearers who had rescued Artoria were. Guhan had specially searched for information and discovered that the detailed information on the famous sword-bearers who had rescued Artoria had been classified as SS-level confidential information and had been sealed. Even Guhan's hacker friends could not obtain such information. In this world, other than some of the higher-ups, no one knew which sword-bearers had been in the team that had rescued Artoria. Senior Qingfeng, I still have 4 teammates scattered in this Miyun reservoir. Senior, please send someone to search for them quickly, Guhan hurriedly said. With Zhu Qingfeng's help, he believed that he would be able to find Steel Centipede and the others very soon. Okay, I'll make the arrangements now. Before Zhu Qingfeng could finish speaking, Steel Centipede and the other 3 appeared beside Guhan. It turned out that they had been targeted by the patrolling boats in the sky and had been fished out as soon as they fell into the water. However, the place where they had landed was quite far from the administrative center, so they had been sent over. Okay, since all of you are here, there's no time to lose. Follow me back to Beijing. The secretary of the Municipal Sword Committee has specially instructed me to let you return to Beijing as soon as possible. He has also specially asked me to protect you. Let's move forward quickly. At the entrance of Beijing Base City, 2 higher-ups were welcoming Artoria. The group of people alighted from Zhu Qingfeng's large hovercraft. I never thought that there would be a day when I would be able to walk into the city walls of Beijing. Artoria looked at the city gates, and her eyes suddenly became moist. She did not know how much she had sacrificed for this moment. Welcome, King Arthur, Your Majesty Artoria. Welcome to our Beijing base city. The higher-ups who came out to welcome her shook Artoria's hand and pulled her into the city. Artoria took a few steps and turned her head. She suddenly realized that Guhan and the others were standing there motionless. She was puzzled, so she shook off the hands of the higher-ups and ran back to Guhan's side. Military Governor, why aren't you going in? You are all heroes too. Artoria was very puzzled. Why didn't Military Governor enter Beijing base city? We have to go. We still have other things to do, so we won't be entering Beijing base city. Guhan smiled and put his hand on Artoria's shoulder. In fact, he had already heard the news that the dungeon had been completed. In 30 seconds, he would leave the dungeon and return to the dungeon settlement center. Well, Military Governor, we'll be leaving first. You guys continue. Steel Centipede laughed loudly and disappeared in an instant. He had already taken the initiative to return to the city and returned to the dungeon settlement center. The Yu siblings and Hong Yu also glanced at Guhan and returned to the dungeon settlement center. Only Guhan was still in the dungeon. Where did they go? Teleportation magic? Artoria asked curiously. She did not expect Guhan to suddenly touch her cheek. Military Governor, what are you doing? Woo! Artoria was suddenly stunned. This military governor actually placed his lips on hers. He actually took the initiative to kiss her. He even stuck his tongue in. Isn't this what French beasts like to do? This kiss lasted for more than 10 seconds. It lasted for more than 10 seconds under the watchful eyes of the onlookers in Beijing. When Guhan's lips parted, Artoria still had not reacted to what had happened. Artoria, I don't know where the real you is, but I swear, I will find you in the future. After leaving this inexplicable sentence, Guhan's figure completely disappeared. In the real world, King Arthur Artoria had been missing for 300 years. No one knew where she was, except for one person. Chapter 213. As there were only 2 days left, the theme of the Instance Dungeon Settlement Center remained the same as the last time Dragonfeather was here. It was still the Sahara Desert. Amidst the golden sky, Steel Centipede and the others were already seated. Even Wondrous Pen, who had died earlier, was seated there. As this was a guild instance dungeon, even if a guild member died, as long as the guild completed the quest, the dead guild member could still receive his reward from the Instance Dungeon Settlement Center. Wondrous Pen was in a good state. When Guhan appeared, he greeted Guhan with a smile and congratulated Guhan for successfully completing the instance dungeon. However, Steel Centipede was the only one who was not afraid of anything and chose to sit together with Wondrous Pen. The other guild members had deliberately distanced themselves from Wondrous Pen. After entering, they did not even say a word to Wondrous Pen. After all, they had to survive in Yaoguang Sword faction. Casually chatting with a traitor would be akin to giving the traitor a handle. However, Guhan did not deliberately distance himself from Wondrous Pen. He casually shook hands with Wondrous Pen and said, "Congratulations." At the end of the day, Guhan was just an outsider who had temporarily joined Yaoguang Sword faction. He was a temporary worker who received remuneration. After the instance dungeon was over, Guhan would have nothing to do with Yaoguang Sword faction. There was no need for him to be afraid of such things. Mr. Military Governor is truly an outstanding person. Although I have long since reminded Teacher Ba Yoon not to ignore your role, it is clear that Teacher Ba Yoon has placed too much trust in my cute junior brother, resulting in the current situation. At that moment, Wondrous Pen seemed to have completed the transition from Yaoguang Sword faction to Stormy Waves Sword faction. Every time he opened his mouth, he would talk about Stormy Waves Sword faction. Wondrous Pen, you are young Master Ba Yoon's disciple? Guhan looked at Wondrous Pen with interest. Steel Centipede and the others were also stunned. Wondrous Pen was actually young Master Ba Yoon's disciple. However, thinking about it carefully, before Guhan appeared, Wondrous Pen had always been the #1 brain of Yaoguang Sword faction. Although his intelligence was not as good as Guhan's, the difference was not big. It was not surprising that young Master Ba Yoon had nurtured such a top talent. I'm just an in-name disciple. In Teacher Ba Yoon's eyes, I'm afraid only junior brother Long Yu is his true disciple. Otherwise, he wouldn't have thrown me into the Alcade Sword sect as a spy. When Wondrous Brush said this, his tone was shockingly cold. Hey! It seems Wondrous Pen is dissatisfied with his treatment. This time, Wondrous Brush's return to the Surging Waves Sword sect is probably a ticking time bomb that could explode at any time. Ji Han pondered silently in his heart, but he wasn't too concerned about it. Be it the Great Waves of the Azure Billows or the Alcade Sword sect, it didn't have much to do with him. Wondrous King, Wondrous Chen asked. Magic, Wondrous Demon asked. He as Wondrous Brush. He was you Military Governor Dragon. Was. Are we still friends? Wondrous Pen asked Guhan sincerely. Yes. Guhan turned his head and stared at Wondrous Pen for a few seconds. In the future, if Wondrous Pen's Great Waves Wondrous Pen needs Mr. Military Governor Dragon's help, will Mr. Military Governor Dragon do me a favor? Wondrous Pen continued with a smile. However, his words made the other people from Yaoguang Sword faction nervous. How would Military Governor Dragon answer this question? I won't do you a favor. Although you are my friend, your face isn't worth it. Guhan's words made Wondrous Pen's face stiffen. The people around him felt relieved. But in the next moment, Ji Han's next sentence turned the situation around. I will only do you a favor based on benefits. As long as Wondrous Pen or Great Waves Wondrous Pen can offer enough benefits, any deal is negotiable. Guhan said with a smile. Understood. Wondrous Pen bowed to Guhan, then returned to his seat and didn't speak anymore. After a series of verbal confrontations and probing, when Guhan sat on the sofa's main seat, the cashier who had been sitting there for a long time waited for all the members to arrive before saying the first line. The entire Instance Dungeons settlement had officially begun. Dear players, Cashier 0791 is at your service. Hearing the name 0791, Guhan's body stiffened. This number was too familiar. Ever since he entered the game, He had cleared the King of Yu's Gojian sword and the Wudong sect's apex dungeon. The person who came out to settle his accounts seemed to be this person with the number 0791. He didn't expect it to be her the third time. Guhan raised his head and carefully stared at 0791's face. As all the cashier NPCs were made from the same face template, it was impossible to find anything wrong with her appearance. Guhan tried to find some clues from her facial expressions and movements. If Guhan's guess was right, and Bat really had their eyes on him, then this cashier 0791 was most likely not a fixed NPC, but an NPC possessed by a high-level AI program. Since it was a high-level artificial intelligence program, being stared at by him like this, it was bound to reveal some emotional fluctuations. However, even though Guhan was about to stare at 0791's face, this NPC still didn't show any emotions. Instead, she calmly dealt with the various matters of the instance dungeon. Hello, respected player military governor. Player wondrous pen Langkanjiang. Player steel meatball. Player Hong Yu. Player Yu Sikong. Player Yu Siu. Your instance dungeon King Arthur's betrayal has completed the statistics. Do you want to start settlement? You can also choose to enjoy the scenery here. Our settlement center's theme for today is the Great Sahara Desert. This was already a standard speech. 0791 was no different from the other cashiers. Begin settlement. Although the Yu siblings and Hong Yu seemed to be very interested in seeing some of the rare desert scenery, it was clear that Guhan wasn't interested. After Wondrous Pen's identity was exposed, his authority collapsed. Guhan's authority in this team was irreplaceable. Although Guhan was only a newbie swordsman with 4,500 quarks of sword essence, as soon as his words left his mouth, Steel Centipede and the other veteran swordsman players with more than 100,000 quarks of sword essence could only put away their thoughts of playing to their heart's content and obediently wait for the instance dungeon settlement. Main Mission 1 has been completed, Main Mission 2 has been completed. Main Mission 7 has an abnormal status, Mission 7 has been cancelled, Hidden Mission 1 has been triggered. Side mission completed, instance dungeon successfully cleared. Total time taken, 3 hours 58 minutes 24 seconds. Beginning mission evaluation. Evaluation criteria, unknown. Evaluation result, SS class. Congratulations to player military governor's team for successfully clearing the instance dungeon King Arthur's betrayal with an evaluation of S-class and above. Achievement for clearing the instance dungeon for the first time achieved. Reward for clearing the sect's first clear achieved. Hidden instance dungeon unlocked. Congratulations to player military governor, player Wondrous Pen Lansang River, player Steel Maiden Meatball, player Hong Yu, player Yu Sikong, player Yu Siu. You have created history and left your great names in the history of Sword Maiden Online. May I ask if you would like to broadcast to the entire channel and let all the players share your joy and success? This kind of broadcast to the entire channel required the permission of the players. Previously, Guhan's broadcast to the entire channel had been approved by default. However, now that it involved an entire team, Guhan naturally needed to confirm it again. Sure. Guhan answered very straightforwardly. For this first clear, all the major sword sects had fought each other to the death. What was it for? Wasn't it for this exciting and famous broadcast to the entire channel? If Guhan dared to say no, he was afraid that Yaoguang would take his case to the Swordsman Arbitration Court. Broadcast to the entire channel, ding dong, with the efforts of Yaoguang Sword Sect's elite swordbearers, military governor, Wondrous Pen Lansang River, Steel Maiden Meatball, Hong Yu, Yu Sikong, and Yu Siu, they have cleared the instance dungeon King Arthur's betrayal with an SS class evaluation and obtained the title King Arthur's Saviors. Their fame has spread far and wide. Broadcast to the entire channel, ding dong. The instance dungeon King Arthur's betrayal has been cleared by an SS class. The entrance to the instance dungeon will be temporarily closed for 24 hours. After 24 hours, it will become a famed sword-grade normal instance dungeon and open to all players. Players who are famed sword-grade or below can enter the instance dungeon through the entrance of Xianyang City Airport ruins. Let us once again thank the 6 King Arthur's saviors for their dedication to the world. In a certain room of the Stormy Waves Sword Sect's encampment, Ou Jen, who was holding a novel titled The Last Military Governor of the Shipgirl World, seemed to be reading it seriously. However, in reality, she hadn't even flipped a page in the past 10 minutes. Suddenly, she heard the sudden broadcast to the entire channel. Pa. Ou Jen slammed the book shut and stood up. She wanted to do something, but after standing there for a few minutes, she suddenly sat back down and flipped to the first page of the novel. This time, she really started to read the novel. A few seconds later, all the management of the Stormy Waves Sword Sect received a message from Ou Jen and Ou General don't bother me for 24 hours. The rocking chair in young Master Ba Yoon's bedroom suddenly stopped. The sickly young Master Ba Yoon sat up abruptly and stretched out his hand as if he wanted to grab something. But in the end, his hand drooped down powerlessly and remained motionless. Then, his entire body disappeared from the game as if it was an illusion. Another one of the old fellows left behind from the era of doomsday bureaucrats had fallen. On the throne of the Yaoguang Sword Sect's hall, Yaoguang remained seated. He had been sitting on his throne for a full 4 hours without saying a word. He didn't even open his eyes. No one knew what he was thinking with his eyes closed. When the news of his sect's success came, he suddenly opened his eyes. He instantly pulled out a jade-green long sword from his back and slashed with all his might. A giant dragon flew out from both sides of the blade and slashed half of the hall into ruins. What's going on? What's going on? A few swordsmen outside the door rushed out. They thought that it was Yuan Ku who had come to kill them, but when they saw that the culprit was their own sect master, they didn't know what to say. Did you all hear the broadcast? Seeing the swordsman nodding excitedly, Yaoguang finally couldn't suppress his smile. Call our sect's architect over. I'm sick of this hall. We'll build a new one. Hooray! The swordsmen shouted together. Looking at the entire Yaoguang Sword Sect's encampment from the hall, the entire Yaoguang Sword Sect was immersed in a celebration. They defeated the Stormy Waves Sword Sect. They won. Chapter 214. Esteemed players, we will now enter the reward calculation phase. First, the basic reward. Before 0791 could finish his sentence, he was interrupted by Guhan. Please wait a moment. If I remember correctly, as the ones who unlocked the dungeon, we should have the right to understand the factors that determine the rating of the dungeon, right? Guhan asked with a smile. Before the first clear of the hidden dungeon, the rules of the dungeon's rating were kept secret. However, after the dungeon was successfully cleared, Guhan and the others would be able to know the details of the rules. This was the right of every player who had put in a lot of effort to clear the dungeon. As for other players, if they wanted to figure out the rules of the dungeon's rating, they could only slowly figure it out through a large number of dungeon clearing attempts. This was a very difficult task and it was impossible to accomplish in a short period of time. This gave Guhan the opportunity to make money. After exiting the dungeon calculation center, Guhan would write down a detailed strategy for the King Arthur's Betrayal dungeon on the forum. Then, he would post it on the internet and sell it for a price. This kind of strategy post was known as the first clear strategy post. Within 3 months after the hidden dungeon was unlocked, other than the first clear team's post, other players were not allowed to post any other strategy posts for this dungeon. If they violated this rule, the player would be imprisoned in the real world. This was also one of the game's rewards for the first clear team. In order to enter the dungeon as soon as possible, they would be the first to clear the dungeon. Most players would reluctantly fork out $5 or $10 for a subscription. Generally speaking, it would not be a problem for the number of subscriptions to exceed 10 million within 3 months. Based on the price of $5 per copy, that would be a large sum of 50 million RMB. In reality, this amount of income would often exceed 80 million RMB. This was because there would always be some rich people who would give a large sum of money. In the past, a rich person had given a record of 6 million RMB to a single copy of the first clear strategy post in Great Kanglan Waves. With a total of 56 million RMB, it had set a record for the most generous reward in history and was praised by later generations. According to the agreement between Guhan and Yaoguang, he and Yaoguang Sword Sect would split the income from this guide 50-50. Even if there was no reward, around 25 million renminbi would be directly transferred to Guhan's account, and the remaining 25 million would be transferred to Yaoguang's Sword Faction's account. As for how Yaoguang would reward his members and how they would split the rewards, it had nothing to do with Guhan. The Instance Dungeon's rating conditions were one of the essential contents of the guide. If Guhan didn't post the rating conditions, the rewards would probably plummet. You didn't even give me a rating, and you still have the nerve to ask for a reward for this post. This is the right of the victor, player Guhan. 0791 nodded silently, then quickly and monotonously recited sad smiley. This instance dungeon is a multi-condition scoring instance dungeon. There are 5 main scoring conditions. Scoring condition 1, Artoria must maintain a pure and untainted state. If this condition is not met, all will be rated as F. If condition 5 is not met, the highest rating will be rated as S. Also, please note that if Artoria is insulted or sexually harassed while unconscious, Artoria will be in an impure state. Scoring condition 2, there must be at least 3 survivors in the team. If there are less than 3, all will be rated as F. If there are more than 3, for every death of a member, the score will drop by 1 level. If condition 5 is not met, the highest rating will be rated as S. Scoring condition 3, if you receive Merlin's blessing and don't let Merlin put Artoria down with magic, your score will drop by 1 level. If condition 5 is not met, the highest rating will be rated as S. Scoring condition 4, the NPC swordbearer responsible for protecting the player must not die. If an NPC swordbearer dies, their score will drop by 1 level. If condition 5 is not met, the highest rating will be rated as S. Scoring condition 5, kill 1 or more of the 3 universe level Yuan Ku. If condition 5 is met, the highest rating will be rated as SSS or above. 0791 quickly read out the list of conditions. The others had a headache as they still didn't understand how the scoring was done. Of course, Jiyu Han and Wondrous Brush, these 2 smart people, fully understood this grading condition. To put it simply, the first condition was a premise. If this premise was not met, the score would be fixed at the lowest F and couldn't be increased. Conditions 1, 2, and 3 were a series of subtractions. The total score would be rated as S. Then, according to the subtractions of 1, 2, and 3, the remaining score would be the corresponding grade. If they wanted to get a score above S, they had to kill 1 or 2 or 3 of the 3 universe level Yuan Ku, Nazi King Hitler, Law King Hammurabi, or 4 elephants King Li Yuanba. Only when this condition was met could the other 3 conditions above condition 5 be rated as SSS. As Jiyu Han's party was lucky enough to kill the Nazi king, they fulfilled the 5th condition. That was why they were given an SSS grade overall score. Condition 1 was naturally met and condition 3 was also met. As for condition 4, Guhan's team didn't even encounter the NPC swordsman team that was prepared to protect them in Siping City. Naturally, condition 4 was also met. Only condition 2, Magic Pen, died, causing Guhan's total score to be deducted by 1 point. Otherwise, Guhan would have been able to directly clear the hidden dungeon with a super SSS rating, creating an unprecedented record. Since the start of the game, no team had been able to complete the first clear with an SSS rating. Thinking about it, it was a pity. Guhan couldn't help but dislike Magic Pen. In response, Magic Pen could only helplessly shrug his shoulders. Player Military Governor. Player Magic Pen Lansang River. Player Steel Meatball. Player Hong Yu. Player Yu Sikong. Player Yu Siu. Now, we will be giving you the rewards for completing the dungeon. First, the basic reward for completing the dungeon, 600 renminbi, 600 essence sword pills, 600 sword scar dust. Under normal circumstances, the basic reward for completing a famed sword instance dungeon was 100. However, Guhan had cleared a 6-man dungeon, so the basic reward was naturally 6 times that. Player Military Governor. P.S. I've left out a bunch of team names in case you guys say I'm weak. This is the first time your dungeon team has cleared the King Arthur's Betrayal dungeon. You can enjoy the benefits of double the first time clearing the dungeon. Your team's overall rating for clearing the dungeon is SS. According to the rules, you can enjoy 30 times the basic reward for the team. Player Military Governor, your team's final dungeon reward, 18,000 renminbi, 18,000 essence sword pills, 18,000 sword scar dust. Please continue to work hard and reach new heights. Player Military Governor, you are the team leader. Please distribute the team rewards. Please distribute the rewards according to the criteria of no less than 5% for each player and no more than 50% for each team member. TSK, according to 0791, if Gu Han did not like anyone in his party, he would be given the lowest 5%, which was 900, and then 50%, which was 9,000, for himself. It did not make any sense at all. It did not make sense for a party leader to have such a privilege. It was not fair at all. However, this was a method the system specifically used to strengthen the team's authority. If a team member did not follow the team leader's instructions during an instance dungeon, it would be a very troublesome matter. However, the team leader did not have a good way to punish such a team member. Thus, the system came up with this rule, using the final reward distribution to establish the team leader's authority and prestige. If you dare to cause trouble, don't even think about getting a good reward. Some players might ask, what if I listen to the team leader's instructions, but the team leader, for the sake of his own interests or because he dislikes me, forcefully gives me the lowest reward? Truth be told, this kind of situation is very rare. That is because this kind of situation only occurs in wild teams. Generally speaking, it would not be a team from a sword sect. If the team leader of a sword sect dared to do such a thing, his reputation would be tarnished, he would be kicked out of his sect. Who would give him the chance to become the team leader? Players would generally not find wild teams to participate in an instance dungeon. If they were forced to find wild teams, they would first apply to the system to monitor the entire process. Once the team leader's reward distribution was uneven, they could complain to the accountant on the spot. The accountant would let the system's AI analyze the entire instance dungeon. After confirming that no team members were disobeying the team leader's instructions, the system would strip the team leader's reward and distribute all the rewards equally to the remaining team members. As for the team leader himself, he would enjoy the reward of being banned for a month. If there was a second time, he would be banned for a year. Thus, situations where the team leader's reward distribution was unfair were very rare. Back to the topic of Gu Han. Although it was very tempting to give 50% of the reward to himself, and he believed that the other team members would not care about it, they were all experts with hundreds of thousands of sword elements. These rewards were not very important to them. The total reward was only 18,000, and if it was divided equally, each of them would only get 3,000. It was not worth it to fall out with Gu Han over such a small amount of reward. However, Gu Han did not intend to get 50% of the reward for himself. Gu Han also did not want to leave behind evidence of his greed in front of others for the sake of these sword elements. Divide it equally, Gu Han said calmly. He did not even deduct Magic Pen's share. Logically speaking, it was not unreasonable for Gu Han to give him 5%. Okay, everyone, keep your rewards. Hence, the large pile of rewards was divided into 6 equal portions and placed in front of everyone. However, it did not take long before Steel Centipede jumped up and pointed at his reward. That's not right. The amount is wrong. It's not right. Gu Han was stunned. The reward was missing. Impossible. The system would not make a mistake in the reward. This kind of mistake was too low level. Sword Maiden Online had been in operation for more than 200 years, and such a thing had never happened before. Miss 0791, why is this reward 3,100? Why is there an extra 100? Steel Centipede asked loudly. So it's an extra 100. Brat, it's fine if you keep it to yourself. Why did you say it out loud? Sorry, I forgot to explain to you. Before you, there was a team that cleared the dungeon with an F-grade result. However, because they did not complete the first clear, the reward was not distributed. Instead, it was distributed to the first team that completed the first clear. That is, your team. So this is the reward of my junior brother Long Yu. Magic Pen said with a bitter smile. This was too ridiculous. Chapter 215. Congratulations to player Military Governor. This is the first time your party has cleared the Eating Instants dungeon. Furthermore, you have obtained an SS rating. Every member of your party will enjoy 10 times the chance of twisting the egg. Your party has achieved an F rating. You can do an egg twisting once. 0791 expressionlessly waved his hand on the large coffee table. A row of 6 egg twisting machines appeared on the coffee table. It seemed that he wanted Guhan and the other 5 to twist the egg together. Logically speaking, it was definitely more exciting to twist the egg in a party than to twist the egg alone. Even if you managed to twist the golden egg alone, it would be the same. It was fine if you cheered for a while. However, once the party twisted the egg together, it would be a lot of fun. A white egg could make you laugh at your teammates for half a day. Similarly, a purple egg could make your teammates hug your thighs and beg you to bring them to Europe. Are we going to twist the egg together or individually? Hong Yu looked at the egg twister in front of her and asked eagerly. There were generally 2 ways to twist the egg in a party. The first way was for everyone to twist the egg at the same time. Then, every time they twisted the egg, they would compete with each other, compare, flatter, and ridicule each other's luck. The advantage of twisting the egg this way was that it was fast. Moreover, if one failed the first time, there would be another chance to compete. The second method was for one person to finish the number of times they could twist the eggs, and then switch to the next person to twist the eggs one by one. This method was slower, but it was the best way to test a person's character. Both methods were very enjoyable. Let's do it together. It's more fun this way. Guhan laughed. Compared to twisting the egg alone, twisting the egg with a party was indeed more fun. They had not even started twisting the egg yet, but he felt that the atmosphere was about to explode. Military Governor, I, Steel Centipede, admit that I may not be as smart as you. However, when it comes to luck, you are definitely no match for me, Steel Centipede. When Steel Centipede heard Guhan say that they should twist the egg together, he immediately jumped up and patted his chest forcefully, provoking him loudly. Since he could not beat this man in terms of intelligence, he would beat him in terms of luck. However, Steel Centipede obviously did not know that he had already raised a huge flag for himself. Steel Centipede took the lead and pressed hard on his own egg machine. The machine spun for a long time. In the end, an embarrassing thing happened. A white egg rolled out. Congratulations to player Steel Centipede Meatball. You have obtained a white egg. You have obtained 1 yuan from twisting it. 0791 impolitely read out the answer that almost made Steel Centipede Meat Centipede's heart collapse. It's no big deal. White will come out sooner or later. Steel Centipede Meat Centipede said forcefully. Steel Centipede Centipede. It's no big deal. White Egg Centipede White Centipede. Congratulations, player Hong Yu. You have obtained a white twisted egg. You have extracted 1 yuan from it. White Lotus. Haha. Hong Yu, you still have the nerve to laugh at me. Ha ha ha, I'm dying of laughter. Seeing that Hong Yu's result was exactly the same as his, Steel Centipede almost fell off the sofa with laughter. But then, the Yu siblings slapped Steel Centipede's face. Both of them twisted a blue egg at the same time. Moreover, these 2 blue eggs miraculously produced 2 sword scar raw stones. These were 5th grade sword scar powder, which required 625 portions of sword scar powder to produce 1 portion of sword scar raw stone. It was meant for a 5th grade sword lady, and it was considered a very good reward among the blue eggs. The market price was around 800 renminbi. Steel Centipede looked at the Yu siblings enviously, then looked at Magic Pen and Guhan. At this time, only the 2 of them were not twisting their eggs. Magic Pen smiled and twisted the capsule machine in front of Guhan. A white capsule came out, and it was still 1 yuan. Guhan followed closely behind. He also got a white egg, but it was no longer $1. Instead, it was a token of the white iron sword. Guhan had lost count of the number of times he had gotten the token of the white iron sword. In short, the Yu siblings won a good prize in the first round. They were so excited that they kissed each other on the spot. Damn it, I don't believe that it's still going to be a white thing. La 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 la, I'm going to at least twist out a blue egg this time. The Iron Centipede continued to raise flags for himself without holding back. Congratulations to player Steel Centipede. You have obtained a white egg. You have twisted 1 yuan from it. 0791's voice was calm and emotionless, but in Steel Centipede's ears, it sounded like the most profound mockery. Damn it, I don't want to live anymore. Steel Centipede sat on the sand angrily and scratched his ears desperately. The feeling of being laughed at was really terrible. You're just an Antarctic man. Don't even think about becoming a European. Think of a way to get to Africa first. Hong Yu said mockingly. Then, she pressed a button on the capsule machine. Congratulations to player Hong Yu. You have obtained a white egg. You have twisted 1 yuan from it. Ha ha ha. I'm dying of laughter. I'm really dying of laughter. Steel Centipede lay on the sand and laughed until his stomach hurt uncontrollably. I forgot to mention that I'm also from Antarctica. Hong Yu's words sounded very calm. However, the emphasis that she emphasized through gritted teeth was definitely not calm. I'll do the next one. Seeing Steel Centipede's expression, Guhan could not help but cut in line and twist his own egg. Congratulations, Commander. You've obtained a purple twisted egg. From within, you've extracted the Lei Feng Pagoda Crusade Mission Crusade letter. Unexpectedly, with just a twist, Ji Yu Han actually extracted a purple twisted egg. The Lei Feng Pagoda Crusade mission might not be a rare crusade mission. However, in terms of rewards, it was top-notch. In particular, the Lei Feng Pagoda Crusade mission had a 0.001% chance of dropping a keepsake of the Emperor Wa's sword. This was an Emperor Sword Lady. A keepsake of the Emperor Wa's sword was sold for 900 million yuan in the market. Of course, it was simply wishful thinking to think that a keepsake of the Emperor Wa's sword could be obtained from a Lei Feng Pagoda Crusade mission. However, it would be very easy to sell it for a few 100,000 yuan in the auction house. In terms of value, it was already worth the purple egg. Ah! I don't want to live anymore. I'm going to kill you, military governor. Steel Centipede pounced on Guhan like a hungry tiger pouncing on its prey. Logically speaking, if Guhan wanted to dodge, Steel Centipede would not be able to hit Guhan no matter what. However, Guhan had no intention of dodging. He allowed Steel Centipede to pounce on him and throw him onto a pile of sand. Steel Centipede sat on Guhan's lap. He grabbed a handful of sand and threw it at Guhan's face. Guhan accidentally threw a large mouthful of sand into his mouth, which was filled with a bitter taste. Guhan did not want to be outdone. He grabbed a handful of sand and threw it at Steel Centipede's head. The two of them instantly started a yellow sand battle, which involved all the surrounding team members. The Yu siblings also joined the battle. Finally, it was Guhan who threw a few handfuls of sand onto her beautiful hair. Immediately, Hong Yu became angry. She let out a strange cry and grabbed 2 handfuls of sand and threw them at Guhan's body. It was clearly thrown at Guhan. Why did it hit Steel Centipede instead? Forget it, it doesn't matter. Losing Steel Centipede is not a big deal. With a leap, Hong Yu also rode on Guhan's face. That's right, it was Guhan's face. Because Steel Centipede was already riding on her, Hong Yu was too embarrassed to fight with Steel Centipede. She also did not want to get too close to Steel Centipede, so she simply rode on Guhan's face and grabbed a few handfuls of sand and threw it wildly. It's a little wet. Hong Yu did not seem to realize that her absolute domain was still directly riding on Guhan's face. Although there was still a small piece of underwear between them, Guhan's nostrils had already been inhaled by Steel Centipede. When the final battle ended, except for Magic Pen who was sitting safely in his seat, everyone else was lying on the desert with sand all over their bodies. 0791 did not urge them to hurry up and twist their eggs. Instead, he looked at this somewhat cute battle on the battlefield with an expression as if he was watching a show. Lying on the sand and gasping for breath, Guhan suddenly had 2 drops of something wet flowing down from the corners of his eyes. Don't misunderstand, Guhan was not being stung by the smell. Instead, how many years had it been since he had experienced such pure happiness? Ever since he was 6 years old, he had suppressed his emotions for 12 years. He had lived a serious and bitter life for 12 years. At that time, he felt that even a little bit of happiness was a blasphemy to his dead relatives. He felt that he did not deserve to have happiness. Only killing Yuan Ku to avenge his parents was his life's goal. However, ever since he became a swordsman, this unsmiling, cold, and unapproachable personality and persona seemed to have gradually drifted away from him. He smiled more and more often, and more sincerely. For example, the way he was fooling around with a bunch of people today was something that he would never have imagined a month ago. Alright, get up and continue twisting your eggs. Don't let Yaoguang wait too long. Guhan patted the sand off his body. Even though his attitude towards life was gradually changing, his life's goal remained the same. Killing all of the Yuan Kus was his life's goal and goal. To correct himself, those filthy Yuan Kus, those Yuan Kus whose hands were stained with the blood of his parents. After a bout of fun, the atmosphere in the scene eased up quite a bit. Everyone began to seriously twist their eggs until the entire process was over. Among everyone, Guhan's luck was still the best. There was only one golden and one blue egg left in the capsule machine. The other items weren't worth mentioning, but the purple egg had miraculously produced the Tai sword scabbard. It was the exclusive scabbard for the Tai sword, which could increase all of the Tai sword's attributes by 50% and its recovery speed by 600%. Others might not be interested in the Tai sword scabbard, but there was one person who was definitely interested in the Tai sword scabbard. This person was none other than OU General. Her sword mistress was the Tai sword, a spirit sword ranked 9th in the spirit sword record. Chapter 216. How about selling this scabbard to me? I can buy it for 40 million renminbi. Wondrous Pen's eyes lit up at the sight of the scabbard. He offered 40 million renminbi right off the bat. This price was almost equal to the price of a whole set of heavenly sword keepsakes. Wondrous Pen was really generous. However, this wasn't surprising. Wondrous Pen was clearly trying to curry favor with OU Gen by buying this scabbard. For someone like him who had been undercover for more than 10 years, he wouldn't have any connections or resources when he returned to the gang. If he returned, he would probably be placed in a low-level yamen and wouldn't be put in an important position. As such, Ingenious Brush urgently needed to establish a good relationship with OU Gino so that it could stay in the Emperor's heart. The Tai sword's exclusive scabbard was the best present for him. This was a rare item that OU Gino couldn't even buy with money. However, Guhan didn't intend to let Wondrous Pen have his way. He put the scabbard back into his yuan pocket. I have other uses for this scabbard, so I won't be selling it. That's a pity. Wondrous Pen's expression was one of regret. However, he didn't pester Guhan to buy this scabbard. In fact, he had already prepared a gift that OU Gen and OU Gen couldn't refuse. This scabbard was just the icing on the cake. Apart from Guhan's luck, which was explosively good, which allowed him to obtain a spirit sword grade scabbard, the rest of the members weren't so lucky. Even if it was a purple toy egg, they only obtained something worth less than 50,000 renminbi. It couldn't even compare to a strand of Guhan's scabbard. However, the toy egg was only the beginning. After the egg twisting was over, the most important reward would be revealed. As mentioned before, there was an incomparable super reward for clearing a dungeon. All the items dropped in the dungeon would be listed out, allowing the participating players to pick any one of them. That's right, they could pick any one of the items dropped in the dungeon. Although the toy egg that was produced from the toy egg machine seemed to be able to be produced from any item. However, in reality, the reward of a toy egg produced from a dungeon would be limited to a certain range. For example, instance dungeons below the level of famed swords would definitely not be able to produce a peerless treasure like green sever hair. However, every instance dungeon would have a few unique and precious super treasures with pitifully low drop rates. For example, the Yu King Trampling the Sword instance dungeon would produce a peerless sword maiden like the Yu King Trampling the Sword, but its pitiful drop rate of 0.00001 would cause all players to despair. However, this reward completely ignores the issue of probability. As long as this instance dungeon's drop warehouse contains severed green silk, you can directly take it. Isn't that awesome? That was also the reason why Hong Yu and the others had given up on clearing instance dungeons and fighting crusades. Instead, they had spent over a month in this hidden instance dungeon. Otherwise, which fool would do something that could end in vain for the sake of the sword faction's honor? Respected players, the instance dungeon's treasure trove is about to open. Are you ready? After distributing all the toy capsule rewards and putting away the toy capsule machine, 0791 clapped his hands and a huge bronze gate appeared out of thin air in the Sahara Desert. The words King Arthur's betrayal were written on the top of the bronze gate. This bronze gate was the entrance to the instance dungeon's treasure trove. Inside it were all the possible items that could be dropped from the King Arthur's betrayal dungeon. Ready, let's go in. Guhan nodded his head and took the lead. He walked to the entrance of the bronze gate. 0791 clapped his hands again and the bronze gate opened. Guhan led his team into the bronze gate and found that the interior of the gate did not look like a treasure trove. Instead, it looked more like a supermarket. That's right, the interior of the bronze gate looked like a supermarket. The interior was brightly lit and rows of shelves were neatly arranged. They were divided into the Sword Maiden token section, the practical item section, the Sword Maiden equipment section, the consumable section, the crusade section, and so on. There were a total of 12 sections. All the possible items that could be dropped from Sword Maiden Online would be placed in these 12 sections. Guhan first walked around the Sword Maiden section. The Sword Maiden section was the largest section in the supermarket. There were hundreds of shelves and thousands of different Sword Maiden tokens were placed there. Gu Han did not even bother looking at the Sword Maiden's keepsake. Who knew how long it would take for him to gather 10 keepsakes? Gu Han's main target was the shelf that only had 6 complete Sword Maidens on it. Just like how Guhan was able to pull out a complete Sword Maiden in the King Yu's Go Gen Gen dungeon, it was also possible to pull out a complete Sword Maiden in the instance dungeon. However, the probability of this happening was very small and the number of Sword Maidens that could be pulled out was pitifully small. From this shelf, it could be seen that in the King Arthur's betrayal dungeon, there were only 6 complete Sword Maidens that could be pulled out. These 6 complete Sword Ladies were the famed Sword Rank's Demon Sacrifice Sword, the famed Sword Rank's Startling Sword, and the famed Sword Rank's Heaven Regicide Sword. Putting aside the Demon Sacrifice Sword and the Startling Sword, they were both ranked towards the bottom of the famed Sword Ladies. However, the Heaven Regicide Sword was ranked 3rd in the famed sword record. Ling Yun of the Great Azure Waves team used the Heaven Regicide Sword. The other 3 were the Spirit Sword Grade Gigantic Q Sword and the Spirit Sword Grade 6 Dao Sword. The last one was the Immortal Sword Grade Mountain Guard Sword. Among these swords, the Immortal Sword Grade Mountain Guard Sword was naturally the most valuable, followed by the 2 Spirit Swords and finally the 3 Famed Swords. Logically speaking, the most valuable items in this room were the 3 Sword Maidens above the Spirit Sword grade. However, Guhan had no interest in owning them. This was because once he chose one of the 6 Sword Maidens, it would be bound to him, unable to be dropped or traded. If he failed to synchronize with them, these 6 Sword Maidens would be no different from scrap metal. Thus, it was as if the others did not even come here to look. They did not have the confidence to synchronize with these Sword Maidens in one go. However, Gu Han wasn't interested in them. It wasn't because he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to synchronize with them, but because these swords weren't suitable for him. They weren't the strongest in their respective levels, so Gu Han wasn't interested in synchronizing with them. On the contrary, when he saw the 3 famed sword grade Sword Maidens, Guhan's heart was slightly moved. That was especially so when he saw the Sky Killer Sword. For a moment, Guhan felt the urge to take it. After all, it was the 3rd-ranked famed sword, much higher than the King of Yu's Go Gen sword. Moreover, he could do it in one go, unlike the Heavenly Sword, which required a lot of effort to search. It was also more compatible with his strength, but after thinking about it, Guhan still gave up on the Sky Killer Sword. This was because Guhan's goal had always been the number 1 famed sword, the 3-foot sword. The power of the number 1 famed sword, the 3-foot sword, far surpassed all the Sword Maidens ranked 2nd and below. Moreover, the 3-foot sword was the one and only human path sword, a famed sword that symbolized the entire human race. There were only 2 human path swords in the world. One was the Emperor sword, the Shenyuan sword, which had only appeared in legends, and the other was the 3-foot sword. Compared to the Sky Killer sword, the 3-foot sword was more suitable for Guhan's abilities. In Guhan's plan, the 3-foot sword was the number one choice among the famed swords. There was no other choice more suitable than it. Since these 6 swords were of no use to Guhan, he left the shelf and walked around the few thousand Sword Maidens tokens. Of these tokens, 85% were Ancient Sword and Treasure Sword Maidens tokens, 14% were Famed Sword Maidens tokens, and 1% were Spirit Sword and Immortal Sword Maidens tokens. Although the Famed Sword Maidens tokens only took up 14%, almost 90% of the Famed Sword Maidens tokens were for you. This was because the number of Famed Sword Maidens was too small. Compared to the thousands of treasure swords and ancient swords, there were only a few hundred. Unfortunately, there was no 3-foot sword token among these tokens. Otherwise, Guhan would not have been so conflicted. He could have just taken the 3-foot sword token. However, Guhan also discovered that there was not even a ruler sword token. This was an inconceivable and abnormal thing. Ji Han had obtained 3 tokens of the Juzi sword from Lu Ban. Logically speaking, the token of the Juzi sword should also be included in the dungeon's drop range. However, Ji Han carefully looked around and found no trace of the token of the Juzi sword. Just when Guhan was a little puzzled, Magic Pen suddenly appeared here. He went straight to the shelf with 6 complete sword maidens and directly picked up the Spirit Sword level 6 Dao's sword. "You want this 6 Dao's sword?" Guhan asked. "Yes, I want her." Magic Pen nodded, his eyes staring at the 6 Dao's sword. "I've wanted her for a long time. I didn't expect to see the complete set here. I'm so lucky." Magic Pen, although I don't think highly of you, I still have to remind you that if you choose the 6 Dao's sword, once the synchronization fails, you will have nothing. Military Governor, let me ask you a question. Do you know how long I've been stuck at the Spirit Sword level? Magic Pen asked with a smile. "I don't know." Guhan shook his head. He was not interested in the matter of Magic Pen. "I've been stuck for 5 years. Magic Pen sighed. "It's been 5 years. In these 5 years, I've experimented with more than 20 Spirit Sword level Sword Maidens. Almost half of the Spirit Sword level Sword Maidens have been completed. Then, I entered the Sword Pavilion full of expectations and came back dejected. The rest of the untested Spirit Sword level Sword Maidens are too difficult to get. I haven't collected a complete set of Spirit Sword level Sword Maidens for 5 months. It just so happens that this 6 Dao's sword is a Spirit Sword level Sword Maiden that I haven't collected before. I want to give it a try. What if this sword succeeds?" Magic Pen's face was full of bitterness. Guhan suddenly understood why Magic Pen made this choice. Now, any chance that he could break through to the famous sword level was tightly grasped in his hands. Other than that, nothing else mattered. "I wish you success." Ji Han patted the Magic Pen's shoulder and then went to another area. He still hadn't found what he wanted, or rather, what he wanted. Chapter 217. Guhan walked around the entire supermarket, but he still did not find anything that interested him. Seeing that the others had found the things they wanted, Guhan gradually became anxious. Guhan wandered from the Sword Lady section to the prop section, and then to the consumables section. After walking through 7 or 8 sections, he still did not see anything that could make his eyes light up. He only found a bottle of Sword Element Oral Solution in the consumables section, which was what Guhan needed. However, this bottle of Sword Element Oral Solution was purple in color, and it could only increase the amount of Sword Element by 200 quarks. It would not be of much help to Guhan in reality. What Guhan needed was a prop that could greatly improve his strength in the competition, not the 200 quarks of Sword Element in reality. After walking around for a long time, the only section that Guhan had not been to was the special prop section. Guhan had the idea of going to the consumables section to get his hands on a bottle of Sword Element Oral Solution. After walking around the special prop section, his eyes suddenly lit up. He found an interesting little thing. It was a dusty little thing that was placed at the bottom of the shelf. It looked inconspicuous. Guhan picked it up and looked at its name. Instantly, His face was full of smiles. He did not expect this thing to be dropped. His reward was it. Guhan was the last to leave the treasure vault. The others had already picked out their items, but Guhan did not know what they had chosen. Only Steel Centipede was happily showing off to the others with a gorgeous washbasin. Guhan recognized this washbasin because he also had one. It was the cornucopia that he had obtained from the Genuine Garrison Crusade mission. It was a magical prop that could turn one treasure into two. After leaving the treasure vault, Guhan found that everyone was looking at him a little strangely. There seemed to be some reluctance in their eyes. This was normal. When the treasure vault was officially closed, it meant that the temporary team was officially disbanded. Guhan was also about to leave the Yaoguang sword faction and return to his days of being alone. Military Governor, let's meet again. The Yu siblings smiled at Guhan. Guhan nodded, of course, we will meet again if there is a chance. Military Governor, although I still don't like you, I, Gongmong, admire you. If you have any problems in the future, look for me, Gongmong. As long as I, Gongmong, can do it, I won't refuse. I'll treat you as my friend. Steel Centipede patted his chest. Just as Steel Centipede had said, his relationship with Guhan was definitely the worst in the team, but he still admired Guhan. He admired Guhan's intelligence and ability. No matter how bad their relationship was, this kind of admiration would come from the bottom of his heart and could not be stopped. I have nothing else to say. I'm leaving. I hope we won't be opponents in the future. Magic Pen waved his hand and left the Instance Dungeon Settlement Center. He had already died in the Instance Dungeon. If he hadn't wanted to receive the reward with his teammates, he would have probably been kicked out of the game for 3 days like Guhan. This time, he immediately left the Instance Dungeon Settlement Center. The next time he went online would be 3 days later. After Magic Pen said his goodbyes, Hongyu was the only one who hadn't spoken to Guhan. In the last Instance Dungeon, it could be seen that Hongyu had secretly become Guhan's assistant. She helped Guhan complete many of the things that he had privately instructed her to do. In the team, the one who had the best relationship with Guhan was undoubtedly Hongyu. I've decided. Hongyu suddenly walked toward Guhan with graceful steps. She wrapped her arms around Guhan's neck, raised her head, and stared into Guhan's eyes. I want to pursue you. I want you to become my, Hongyu's, man. This sudden confession was too sudden. Not only did Ji Yuhan not react, but even Steel Centipede and the Yu siblings, who were watching from the side, were also stunned. Hongyu, didn't you want to pursue our Yaoguang's sect leader and marry him? Why did you change your mind so quickly? Aren't you afraid that sect leader Yaoguang will be sad if he finds out? Steel Centipede shouted loudly. Enough. Yaoguang has rejected me, Hongyu, over 100 times. I, Hongyu, don't like him anymore. This military governor is several times better than Yaro Guang. Hongyu doesn't want that stinky Yaoguang anymore. Hongyu stuck out her tongue at Steel Centipede. She wanted to say something to Guhan, but unexpectedly, Guhan leaped out of Hongyu's embrace. Hongyu, I don't have any plans to be with anyone for now. You've found the wrong person. Just give up. After saying that, Guhan's figure gradually faded away. Finally, he disappeared from the Instance Dungeon Settlement Center. After leaving the Instance Dungeon Settlement Center, Guhan directly returned to his sword catacomb. He told King Yu and Heavenly Reliance that he would be offline for a long time. He estimated that he would not be able to come back online for 4 to 5 days. Heavenly Reliance appeared to be very indifferent. However, she moved closer to Guhan to curry favor. Hey, Husky, you can leave, but you have to leave something behind. What is it? Guhan was momentarily confused. What does Heavenly Reliance want me to leave behind? Is it a hug of love? Of course not. Heavenly Reliance waved her palm and made a gesture of taking out money. Of course it's money. You'd better leave at least 1 to 200,000. Otherwise, this heroine won't even have enough money to drink. This heroine had discovered that after Guhan left, she had no money to buy alcohol. Thus, she urged Guhan to leave behind some pocket money. Is this enough? Guhan took out 50,000 renminbi and handed it to Heavenly Reliance. Thanks. Husky. I'll give you one. Heavenly Reliance quickly kissed Guhan's face. Then, she took the money and walked out happily. This action of hers was similar to that of a goddaughter begging her godfather for money. It was indeed similar. After satisfying Heavenly Reliance's needs, it was time for King Yu's. However, King Yu seemed to be much easier to deal with than Heavenly Reliance. She simply waved her hand and impatiently indicated that she only wanted to watch TV shows online. Forget about 4 to 5 days, Guhan could even stay offline for 4 to 5 months without any problems. Alright then, see you next week. Guhan waved at King Yu. His figure gradually became indifferent. This time, he disappeared from the game world. Stinky military governor, rotten person, King Yu suddenly pounced on the keyboard. Her face kept scrolling on the keyboard. Deep marks accompanied by tears soaked her cheeks and skin. Guhan, you're finally awake. You've been inside for so long this time. You didn't even come out to play with Qingpin. Qingpin doesn't like you anymore. As soon as Guhan opened his eyes, he saw Qingpin riding on him. Qingpin was wearing the panda suit he bought last time. However, because Qingpin's head was too small, the 2 black and white ears didn't appear on either side of Qingpin's ears like the designer of the panda suit had imagined. Instead, they were planted on Qingpin's head. They looked like a pair of cute horns. This cute thing. You're so adorable that it's killing me. Guhan's heart was fiercely touched by Qingpin's cuteness. He hugged Qingpin's little butt and stood up from the bed. Qingpin, what time is it now? It had been more than 30 hours since Guhan logged out of the game. In these 30 hours, Guhan had been researching and planning the final strategy to clear the dungeon, so he hadn't logged out of the game. When he woke up, he couldn't tell the time in reality. Aya, how would I know about this kind of thing? Hey, Sister Mayun, what time is it today? His eyebrows furrowed, and he pushed the responsibility of this task to his personal maid, Wen Mayun. It's 16:56 in the afternoon now. Lady Qingpin, there are still 34 minutes before you start eating. Please don't worry, your dumper pork is already simmering on the stove. Wen Mayun thought that Qingpin was asking about the time because he was concerned about when the meal would start. After spending a few days with Qingpin, Wen Mayun had fully understood Qingpin's temperament. This master of hers was probably only interested in pork, especially natural pork. Everything else was not within her scope of concern. Oh, no, her master was also something she was seriously concerned about. Every time the Calabash brothers finished broadcasting, Qingpin would run over to Guhan, who was immersed in the game. He would pinch here and there. Occasionally, he would also like to put his own feet into his master's mouth. Guhan thought it was some peerless delicacy, so he licked and ate it happily. However, to be honest, Qingpin's little feet did not have any stench when eaten. On the contrary, it had a strange feeling like sandalwood. Today is the 7th of August in the year 3001, right? Is it going to be night again? Is tomorrow the 8th of August again? When Guhan heard Wen Mayun's report, he silently calculated in his heart. He still remembered that after the Deep Sword Scar class ended, his homeroom teacher, Luo Fan, said that the next practical training class was about to start. Now that he thought about it, it would start the day after tomorrow. There was only one free day left for the solid cold. However, Guhan did not have much time. After dinner today, he still had to spend the whole night organizing and writing a guide for King Arthur's betrayal. At this time, there were probably hundreds of people on the forum eagerly waiting for his guide to be published so that they could rush into the dungeon and start the guide. After tonight, Guhan still had to log into the game the next day. He had some time to communicate with Yaoguang, and he also had to go to the Stormy Wave Sword sect to collect his wager, the 3-demon subduing sword formation. This was the biggest reason that Guhan won the 8 cities sword duel. Finally, there was one more thing that Guhan had to do before he left the city. This was more important than anything else. It was something that Guhan had never forgotten. Chapter 218. While Guhan and Qingpin were happily eating the pork dishes, the forum was in a frenzy. All sorts of posts about the first clear of the instance dungeon kept popping up. There was one post that was the most popular. The post had a big and eye-catching title, The Beginning of the Decline of a Prosperous Dynasty, The Throne of Canglan Billows. The post first used an attitude of someone who had seen through the changes of the world. It talked about the metaphysical principle of 30 years in the East, 30 years in the West. It pointed out that the upward curve of the Canglan Billows had ended. After the peak, the Canglan Billows had entered a downward curve. The main point of the post was that the Canglan Billows had been defeated by a new player who had teamed up with a sword sect that was not even in the top 10. They had also lost a large amount of sword sect resources and the 3 demon suppression sword formation left by the founder, Jiyu Jin Guan. This huge failure was a sign that the Canglan Billows' strength was rapidly declining. All sorts of bureaucracy prevailed, and all sorts of useless nepotism occupied the top positions of the Canglan Billows. The Canglan Billows was like an old man with an incurable chronic disease. It was only a matter of time before it was destroyed. The post praised Guhan and the Yaoguang sword sect. It said that the military governor was definitely the most outstanding and dazzling player in the past 30 years. He was much more dazzling than Oyu Jio and Yaoguang from 10 years ago. Whether it was his intelligence or strength, he had crushed the newbies of the same generation. In the future, there would definitely be a place for the military governor at the peak of the gaming world. The post was not exaggerating. It listed the super achievements that the military governor had so far. For example, he was the first SSS rank player to clear the Yu Wang Gojian Sword Instance Dungeon in 200 years. He found the Wu Dang Peak Instance Dungeon Easter egg that no one had found in 200 years. He triggered an Emperor Sword quest at the youngest age. He led the team to snatch the first clear from the Canglan Billows at the youngest age. The military governor's achievements were all real. Guhan had only been in the game for a month, and he had entered the game at the minimum age of 18. He wasn't a veteran who had been fighting outside for more than a decade and entered the game at the age of 30. Just look at the achievements of Yaoguang, who was known as the leader of the new generation, and Oyu Zhen, who had been in the game for a month. Their combined achievements weren't even 1/4 as dazzling as the military governor. The post even compared the military governor to Jiyu Jin Jendi, who had just entered the game. Even though the author of the post didn't think that the military governor's final achievement would be on par with Jiyu Jin Jendi, he believed that it was possible for him to be second only to Jiyu Jin Jendi. He also guaranteed that the military governor would rule the game for 1 or 2 generations and become the undisputed king of the game. The author used all his strength to praise Guhan from the beginning to the end. Those who didn't know would think that the author was a fake army that the military governor had spent a lot of money to hire. Unbeknownst to them, when Guhan saw the post, he was also confused. Did this person want to curse him to death? Ji Yuhan thought that the people who replied to this post were all scolding the OP for being an idiot and scolding the OP for being a water army that he had hired. In the end, when he opened the post to take a look, there was actually a large amount of praise and praise. They all said that the OP had written well and that the admiral was indeed the future leader. There were even people who tipped the OP a few hundred RMB, praising the OP for speaking their minds. Guhan flipped through more than 10 pages of posts and found that 90% of them agreed with the OP and flattered him. Occasionally, there were 1 or 2 sensible people who felt that the military governor needed more time to observe before making a conclusion. However, they were attacked by the crazy fans of the military governor. In the end, they didn't even dare to say anything bad about him. There's something wrong here. Ji Yuhan closed the thread, and the corner of his mouth curled into a smile. The author of this thread and the replicant were undoubtedly fake reviewers. However, they weren't the fake army hired by Guhan's supporters. Instead, they were the fake army hired by the enemies who didn't like Guhan. Their purpose was very simple. They wanted to promote Guhan on the internet as high as possible. Everyone might ask, aren't they crazy? Since they were Guhan's enemies, why did they promote him? Shouldn't they slander Guhan in all kinds of ways? Of course, Guhan's enemies weren't crazy. On the contrary, they had high IQs. This was because they knew that if Guhan didn't take the initiative to make a mistake and didn't expose any explosive scandal or failure, it was impossible to discredit Guhan with just their words. Then, in turn, they would promote Guhan. Guhan's current achievements seemed very dazzling, but in fact, there weren't many achievements that could become the cornerstone of Guhan. Now that Guhan was being praised so highly by them, it was like a bottomless platform or a floating cloud in the sky. And if Guhan were to be blinded by these praises and really thought that he was such a powerful person, then due to his arrogance and carelessness, failure was inevitable. Just like a certain reverse queue player before the apocalypse who really believed in the praises of the world's #1 mid laner on the internet. As a result, it would be difficult for him to climb back up after falling for the rest of his life. Guhan was also in the same situation. As long as Guhan made a mistake, then the entire platform would collapse. In the past, Guhan's enemies praised Guhan as highly as Guhan fell. This could be said to be a vicious scheme. Guhan quickly understood all kinds of nonsense, but Guhan didn't intend to deal with these open and covert attacks. In Guhan's opinion, there was no need to do so. Let them praise him as high as they wanted. Anyway, he wouldn't fall for the rest of his life. In addition to this malicious post praising Guhan, there were even more posts begging the military governor to quickly release the strategy guide for King Arthur's betrayal. These gamers kept posting posts like this. Has the military governor's strategy guide been released yet? When will the military governor's strategy guide be released? Military governor begs you to release the strategy guide as soon as possible. My sword lady is dying for it. Military governor, if you release the strategy guide before 7 p.m., I will tip you 1,888 renminbi. Do you believe me? Yes, these were probably the voices urging Guhan to release the strategy guide as soon as possible. These kinds of posts occupied more than half of the main page of the forum. This was a very impressive achievement. Guhan didn't want to keep these gamers in suspense. He was happy to release the strategy guide now, but this wasn't practical. This was because he hadn't written a single word yet. From 6 in the afternoon to 12 in the evening, Guhan finally finished writing the entire guide. It took him a total of 6 hours to do so. The reason it took him so long was not because Guhan was very conscientious and wrote a lot of words. In fact, the total number of words was only about 4,000. In the hands of a web novelist, it would only take 2 hours to finish. The reason why it took 6 hours was because Guhan had been seriously writing this guide. He had listed out many details that could affect the rating, as well as things that needed to be taken note of. When chatting with NPCs, he had listed out all the taboo topics that should not be discussed, and so on. For example, after killing the coyote, he had to remember to clean up the carcass. When talking to Luban, he had to maintain respect for him. When interacting with Artoria, he had to show her enough respect. Finally, Guhan was very considerate. He listed out all the questions he had answered during the college entrance examination, as well as the questions that Gangshan and the others had answered. He even included the standard answers. Of course, this was just a drop in the bucket for the dungeon's question bank. It was only 1%. When the entire strategy guide was finished, Guhan carefully revised it again. He corrected some typos and sentence problems. He named it Military Governor's Post, Guide to the First Clear of King Arthur's Betrayal Instance Dungeon. He set the subscription amount to 5 yuan. After splitting the revenue with the official account of Yaoguang Sword Sect, he posted the strategy guide. The administrator behind the forum was probably keeping a close eye on Guhan's actions. When he used his alternate account, 12580, to confirm and post the guide, this post was set to be the pinnacle of the forum by the administrator and appeared at the top of the forum. Dear Swordsman Guhan, someone has read your sub-account, Military Governor 12,508's post on the forum. Military Governor's Post, Guide to the First Clear of King Arthur's Betrayal Instance Dungeon. After paying 5 yuan and deducting 20% of the personal income tax, your game account has been automatically credited with 2 yuan. In an instant, Guhan's personal terminal began to crazily accept such subscription messages. Fortunately, Guhan had taken precautions and set up the Do Not Disturb mode. Thus, the series of prompts did not cause his brain to explode. 10 minutes after the post was posted, the number of views of the entire post had exceeded 200,000. Just the subscription fees alone amounted to 500,000 renminbi being transferred into Ji Yuhan's account. This didn't include the tipping fees. 100, 588, 1888, 5888, 10,000, etc. All sorts of tipping fees were thrown towards this guidepost. In the tipping statistics section of the post, Ji Yuhan could see that the person who had tipped the most was an unknown nouveau riche called Zee is my wife. He had actually tipped this guide post 100,000 renminbi in one go. This caused Guhan to sigh. The nouveau riches of this world are really willful. By the time Guhan woke up the next morning, the strategy guide had earned Guhan 15 million in subscriptions and 51 million in rewards. Based on Guhan's calculations, the strategy guide should have earned 30 million in subscriptions and 45.02 million in rewards. That would mean a total of 6 million people had read Guhan's strategy guide. The number of readers was still rising. There were a total of 120 million people in the 8 base cities on Earth. It was estimated that there would be a total of 50 million readers in the end. After all, among the 120 million people, about 100 million were poor people who didn't have jobs and could only rely on games to pass their empty spiritual lives. Chapter 219. King Yu, I've decided. From today onwards, I'll give up on Qing Pin, give up on Heavenly Sword, give up on all the sword ladies in the future. I'll stay in the game for the rest of my life and be with you. Guhan held up King Yu's face and said gently, "Annoying, when did I give up on the other sword ladies? When did I say I'll be with you forever? Annoying, annoying, annoying." King Yu lowered his head and looked extremely shy. "You said that you'll be with me in the game for the rest of your life. You're not allowed to go back on your word." "I won't go back on my word. I, Ji Yuhan, have cheated the heavens and the earth. I've cheated the people of the world. I won't cheat you, King Yu." Ji Yuhan raised his hand and swore to the heavens. "Logically speaking, you, Guhan, have already said that you'll cheat the heavens and the earth and the world, so what's the use of swearing? Isn't swearing lying to the heavens?" However, King Yu didn't seem to notice Guhan's laughable word game. He stood up in surprise and pounced into Guhan's embrace. "Stinky, despicable person. I, King Yu, will crush you to death. Ouch, it hurts, it hurts, it hurts." King Yu suddenly opened his eyes and saw that he had fallen to the ground. There was a sharp table leg beside his head. It seemed like King Yu had knocked into this table leg. Last night, King Yu had been sitting in front of the computer watching TV. He didn't know when, but he fell asleep on the computer table. It seemed like he was too agitated in his sleep, causing him to fall off the chair and knock into the table leg. Feeling the pain on his forehead and thinking about what happened in his dream, a sense of grievance surged up his heart. "Pa." King Yu stood up and slammed the computer table. After feeling the vibration, the computer monitor immediately lit up and started to play the TV series that King Yu hadn't finished watching. At this moment, the TV series had entered its climax. The male and female lead who had reunited after a long time threw away everything in their hands and pounced into each other's embrace, enjoying the sweetness of love. This was a heartwarming scene, but in King Yu's eyes, it seemed to be a deep mockery. "How dare you? Even you dare to look down on this king?" King Yu's eyes turned red. "Trash military governor, stinky military governor, trash military governor, despicable military governor. If you have the ability, don't come back to play games. If you have the ability, don't come back to see me. If you have the ability, don't use me. No, don't play me. Anyway, don't come back." King Yu's sword suddenly and slashed at the computer table in front of her. How could this pitiful computer desk and computer withstand King Yu's sword? It was instantly cut in half. The computer screen that was originally playing the TV series was also completely extinguished. "Ziwei, I love you. I swear, I'll never leave you again. You don't know how painful it is for me to love you. I can't watch the stars and the moon with you. I can't talk about life philosophy with you from poems and songs. I'm really in pain. I'm in so much pain. I don't ever want to leave you again. Yongqi, I love you too. I swear that I will never leave you again. I don't know how painful it is for me to love you too. I can't watch the stars and the moon with you, and I can't talk about the philosophy of life with you. I'm really in pain, in pain, in pain. I don't ever want to leave you again. Ziwei. Yongqi. Although the monitor was broken, the mainframe was still intact and the speaker was still there. The two funny protagonists were still expressing their heartfelt feelings to each other. Then, there was no then. The mainframe was also killed by the angry King Yu. So annoying. 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 Trash, even you dare to bully this king? Even you dare to bully this king? This king will tear your body apart by 5 horses, 10 horses, 100 horses, 1,000 horses, 10,000 horses, 100 million horses, all of you will be torn apart. Torn apart. This pitiful computer desk became King Yu's final punching bag. After being brutally killed by King Yu's inhumane swords, it finally became a pile of unknown electronic components. How inhumane! King Yu, what are you doing? Did this computer offend you? Suddenly, Guhan asked curiously from behind King Yu. None of your business. King Yu retorted without turning his head. He continued to hack at the computer a few more times before suddenly coming to his senses. He turned in horror and saw Guhan's strange face. You, why are you here? King Yu was about to become incoherent. She just couldn't understand why Guhan would appear here and just happened to see her crazy state. Didn't you say that you might not be online for 4 to 5 days? Is that weird? Guhan walked to King Yu's side. You said it yourself. I said it might be 4 to 5 days, then I might also be online. Just now in reality, Ming Yu came to find me and said that Yao Guang wanted to talk to me about something, so I went online. So it was Ming Yu who looked for you back then, that's why you came online. When King Yu heard this, his anger flared up again. If another woman called and Ji Yu Han came online, then what did he count as? Well, women hated this. They would always neglect some important things. For example, this time, it was actually Yao Guang who came to find Guhan. Back then, Ming Yu was just a mouthpiece. Why is your face so red? Guhan stretched out a hand and touched King Yu's face. As expected, it was very hot, like a volcano. You have a cold and a fever. Guhan rubbed the hand that touched King Yu's face on her forehead. She compared the temperature of the two and came to a conclusion. King Yu, you really have a fever. Get lost. King Yu was about to go crazy. Like a hungry tiger, she pounced on Guhan and pressed Guhan onto the bed. Her pink fists pounded on Guhan's head, body, and legs. Luckily, she maintained her rationality. She didn't take out the King Yu sword and poke a few holes on Guhan's body. Alright, stop messing around. Guhan turned around and pressed King Yu onto the bed. King Yu twisted and wanted to resist, but Guhan's legs clamped down and King Yu's entire body went limp. At this moment, the two people's posture could be said to be very ambiguous. Ji Yu Han's lower body was kneeling, and her knees were tightly clamped on both sides of Yu Wang's thighs. Yu Wang's pair of slender legs were like a pair of ivory jade chopsticks connected together. After Guhan clamped King Yu's thighs, he sat on her snow-white thighs. The two sensitive things under his crotch happened to collide face to face. At the same time, Guhan bent down and gradually pressed his face against King Yu's face. Forehead touched forehead, nose touched nose, lips touched lips. You, what do you want? Let go of this king. King Yu's words were soft and had no confidence at all. There was no decisiveness or threat in his tone. This pitiful little sheep had already fallen. You have a fever, King Yu, you need to cool down. Ji Yu Han's face descended once more, allowing his entire face to touch King Yu's face completely. Ji Yu Han's breath directly blew onto King Yu's face, making his face even more unbearably hot. King Yu couldn't help but snort. It was like a beautiful young woman who had been widowed for more than 10 years and moaned like rain for the first time. Hurry up and scram. You don't want to see me. Hurry up and scram. Alright, then I'll scram. King Yu only said this insincerely, but Guhan seemed to take it seriously. He climbed up from King Yu's body like a customer who had paid and left. I'm leaving. Guhan even tidied up his collar and trousers. Brother, you didn't take off your clothes. Why are you tidying up this thing? Scram! King Yu buried his head in the blanket. His voice was a little muffled. It sounded like he was crying, but after listening carefully, it didn't seem like it. King Yu, I know your intentions. Guhan wasn't an EQ idiot. He was like the main character in the Japanese anime before the apocalypse. The female lead had clearly shown it, but they couldn't seem to see that the female lead liked him. Guhan vaguely understood that King Yu's heart was on him. However, this is a game world. My home doesn't belong here. Sooner or later, I will completely leave the game and won't log into this world. I will find my life goal and dream in the real world outside. I belong to reality. The game is only a necessary way for me to realize my dream. I hope you can understand. Guhan's words were indifferent and very calm, but in King Yu's heart, it was like being cut by a knife. It made King Yu feel like he was in a sea of fire. So, do you want this king to forget you forever? King Yu suddenly sat up from the bed. The 2 tear stains on her cheeks were very obvious. She was really crying. That's good. Go and buy a dew of cherishing fate. That way, we can completely sever our ties. This king will continue to fall into endless slumber and won't have to live like this anymore. I didn't mean that. Guhan shook his head. I won't give up on you. Since you've become my sword mother, I will always be responsible for you. Responsible? How will you be responsible? A trace of anticipation flashed across King Yu's eyes, but there was also a trace of confusion and confusion. Aren't you going to gradually give up on the game? I will synchronize with your main body in the real world. That way, your memories will return to the real world along with your main body. You will still be able to accompany me for the rest of my life. Okay. King Yu nodded. She knew that Guhan was a man who would do what he said. Chapter 220. Mr. Admiral, sorry to trouble you. I've specially asked you to come here. In the meeting room of Yaoguang's sword faction, Yaoguang sat alone on the main seat. There was only a chair beside him and a cup of tea on the table in front of him. Obviously, it was prepared for Guhan. Guhan sat down without hesitation. You don't look too good. After defeating the great waves of storm, the reputation of your Yaoguang sword faction has soared to the sky. Shouldn't you be happy? Guhan noticed that Yaoguang's face was not as happy and excited as he had imagined. On the contrary, there was a lot of worry and cautiousness hanging on his face. He couldn't help but evaluate Yaoguang a little more. This person was unfazed. His future was definitely immeasurable. Victory is victory, but since then, we have formed a huge grudge with the great waves of Storm Sword faction. This will become a huge hidden danger sooner or later. Who knows when it will erupt? When that time comes, all our efforts will be in vain. The gains do not make up for the losses. Yaoguang said with a wry smile. This time, he had intercepted the great waves of Storm Sword faction. It had put him under a lot of pressure. If the first sword faction were to give him a leg up, his Yaoguang sword faction might have to spit out the benefits they had swallowed. These are all obvious things. Yaoguang, since you have foreseen this, why don't you take the initiative to retreat? Guhan said with a smile. Yes, but the meat has been delivered to my mouth. I can't just not eat it, can I? Yaoguang also smiled. Could it be that Mr. Military Governor is willing to give up this delicious piece of meat? Of course I am. Even if it is not delivered to my mouth, I will rush over and take a bite like a wolf. Guhan looked at Yaoguang. He knew that Yaoguang was the same as him. He would never wait for meat to be delivered to his mouth. As soon as he saw traces of meat, he would rush over without hesitation and tear off the biggest piece of meat. This was how the Yaoguang sword sect managed to become a sword sect that was second only to the top 10 sword sects in just a dozen years. Other than the Kanglan sect when Jiyu Jinheng rose to power, no other sword sect could reach this speed. Then let's get down to business. Yaoguang took the initiative to end the topic. Just an hour ago, the billowing storm sword sect had already delivered all the bets to me as promised. However, there was a small problem. Yaoguang tapped the table lightly. The tripartite demon subduing sword formation isn't included in this wager. They don't want to give it to me. You don't want to keep your promise? Guhan frowned. If that was the case, then there would be trouble. This bet didn't happen in the game, but rather on the forum. The system would not monitor or protect such a wager. In other words, the system would not enforce this wager. If the billowing storm sword sect wanted to be thick-skinned and break their promise, Guhan would not be able to do anything to them. No, they just said that since the tripartite demon subduing sword formation wasn't a wager between the Yaoguang sword sect and them, the item should naturally be taken away by the owner. There was no need for the Yaoguang sword sect to do it for them. So, they asked me to tell you to take some time to go to the billowing storm sword sect and take it away. Yaoguang stared at Guhan with interest. He wanted to see how Guhan would react. Anger, helplessness, or a bitter smile. However, it was obvious that Yaoguang had guessed wrongly. Guhan only gave a simple "oh" and did not say anything else. This made Yaoguang feel a little awkward. Mr. Military Governor, what do you plan to do? After a moment of silence, Yaoguang took the initiative to break the awkwardness and asked. Wait for a while. I don't have the time to deal with them now. Guhan waved his hand, as if the billowing storm sword sect were some annoying flies and mosquitoes. He had a completely indifferent attitude. Is that so? Yaoguang took a sip of tea. This military governor was really hard to read. No one could tell what he was thinking or thinking. You didn't ask me to come here just to tell me about the billowing storm sword sect, right? Guhan blew on the steaming hot tea. He was acutely aware that Yaoguang did not ask him to come here for something as simple as handing over the bet. As expected, nothing can be hidden from you, military governor. That's right, there is a very troublesome matter that I would like Mr. Military Governor to help me worry about. I wonder if Mr. Military Governor is willing to help us, Yaoguang sword sect. Troublesome matter. Guhan pondered for a moment. But you guys are preparing to challenge for the seat of the Eternal Autumn Water Sword sect. Clang. The tea in Yaoguang's hand almost fell onto the table. He looked at Guhan with fear in his eyes. What was Guhan's brain made of? His words were still brewing in his head, and he said it out loud. This man was too scary, too scary. What's there to be surprised about? Guhan smiled. This time, your Yaoguang sword sect obtained a huge amount of rewards for the first clear of the instance dungeon. You also defeated the invincible golden body of the billowing storm sword sect and obtained an unimaginable reputation. Now, you even snatched away so many construction resources from the hands of the billowing storm sword sect. Your Yaoguang sword sect is probably going to develop to the point where it aims to conquer the world. Coveting the position of one of the top 10 sects is only natural. By the way, I also participated in the crusade quest where your precious little sister, Ming Yu, received the establishment decree. I know that you have an establishment decree in your hands. You don't even have the last thing stopping you guys from challenging the Eternal Autumn Water Sword sect. Given your personality, how could you not be interested in that position? Every single word that Guhan said struck Yaoguang's heart. They were all what Yaoguang was thinking. Ever since the establishment of the Yaoguang sword sect, it had developed rapidly. It had become an existence that was second only to the 10 great sword sects. Naturally, it coveted the position of the 10 great sword sects. In order to enter the 10 great sword sects, it was only natural that one of the original 10 great sword sects would have to be ousted and replaced. In order to challenge the 10 great sword sects, 2 conditions must be fulfilled. The first condition was that one's own sword sect had reached the level of aspire to rule the world. Only by reaching that level would one have the qualifications to challenge the 10 great sword sects. The second condition was that one must have the establishment decree. In order to challenge the 10 great sword sects, one must first find the Sword Sect Management Committee under the Sword Council. Then, with the establishment decree and half of one's own sect's resources as the price, one must issue a challenge to the last place in the 10 great sword sects. If the challenger won, half of the resources would be returned. If the challenger lost, the other half of the resources would be given to the 10th place sword sect. The reason why these 2 rules were set up was to prevent too many challenges to the 10 great sword sects. Without these restrictions, some of the smaller sword sects would challenge the 10th place sword sect every day. Then, The 10th place sword sect would not be able to survive. They would just be harassed to death. The development of a sword sect to aspire to rule the world required a large amount of resources and a vast amount of reputation. These two things required a lot of time to accumulate. Even Yaoguang's sword sect, led by a powerhouse like Dazzling Light, had spent more than a decade to gather the resources and reputation needed to level up to aspire to rule the world. However, Guhan had helped Yaoguang's sword sect obtain the first clear of the instance dungeon. He had also swindled a large amount of resources from great storm waves. This instantly allowed Yaoguang's sword sect to gather the resources and reputation needed to level up to aspire to rule the world. That was why Yaoguang's sword sect had gritted its teeth and agreed to Guhan's surprisingly risky challenge. Although the risk was high, the reward of success was also great. It was so great that Yaoguang's sword sect could save a few years to realize its ambition. Next was the establishment decree. This item was limited to 2 per year, and it caused the other people who wanted to challenge for the position of the 10 great sword sects to feel troubled. There were too many ambitious people, and there were also too many people who wanted to establish their own sects. The number of establishment decrees they produced was not even enough to establish a sword sect. Who would be willing to use them to challenge the 10 great sword sects? What's more, they had to take out half of their own sect's resources as a bet. Once they lost, the entire sect would completely collapse and then be unable to recover. That was why most of the sect leaders of the sword sects were not interested in doing something that had a high possibility of losing both their lives and their wealth. In the past 30 years, the number of challenges to the 10 great sword sects could be counted on one hand. There were about 8 to 9 times. Among them, there was only one victory, which was against the current 5th-ranked 10,000 longevity sword sect. The rest had all failed. And those sword sects that failed had basically withdrawn from the stage of history due to various disputes after their failure, never to rise again. Especially the current 10th-ranked Eternal Autumn Water Sword sect. It was established at the same time as Great Storm Waves. Its first sect leader was Yesterday's Snow, who had a tangled relationship with Jiyu Jin. It was said that the two of them were originally childhood sweethearts, and had been decided to be a couple. Unfortunately, the world changed, and this couple eventually parted ways, establishing their own sword sects in succession, and then killing their way into the 10 great sword sects. However, Jiyu Jin's Great Stormwave sword sect advanced triumphantly all the way, becoming the number 1 of the 10 great sword sects and dominating the world. Meanwhile, the Eternal Autumn Water Sword sect, which had snowed yesterday, had gradually fallen. In recent years, they had fallen to the last position. If not for the great waves of azure waves secretly helping them, the Eternal Autumn Water Sword sect might have already fallen out of the top 10. Therefore, the Eternal Autumn Water Sword sect had become the best target for Yaoguang's sword sect. Since they had already become enemies with great storm waves, they did not care about what happened to great storm waves. Yaoguang had already made up his mind to take down the Eternal Autumn Water Sword sect. I've already broken through and become an immortal sword tier sword wielder. Yaoguang opened his mouth and revealed another extremely explosive piece of news. To think that Yaoguang had already broken through spiritual sword tier and become an immortal sword tier sword wielder. Originally, I had already drawn up a detailed plan that could completely take down the Eternal Autumn Water. Even if great storm waves helped them, it would be useless. At this point, Yaoguang smiled bitterly. But I never expected that Marvelous Pen, who had been with me for 12 years, was actually a spy. He was the one who had drawn up this plan. With his departure, my plan was completely exposed. More importantly, with Marvelous Pen's departure, I've lost a powerful famed sword tier battle power. In this case, there's a high chance that I'll lose the battle, so I have to make up for the shortcomings of Marvelous Pen's departure. So you've taken a fancy to me? Guhan raised his head and looked at Yaoguang, then looked at his watch. Your challenge shouldn't be so soon, right? I don't have time today. I'll tell you in detail next time. I have urgent matters to attend to now. Goodbye. Seeing that Guhan had left the conference room directly, Yaoguang felt very bad. He had only said half of what he wanted to say, and the various benefits and transactions had not been carried out. Was it really good for him to leave just like that? Chapter 221. If there were any management offices in Sword Maiden Online that had the most people, it would definitely be the Sword Catacomb Management Office. Everyone knew that no matter what era it was, the most profitable industry would always be the real estate industry. As Guhan's only home in the game, the Sword Catacomb was just a dilapidated thatched hut. There was only one room in total. It was very cramped to fit Yu Wang's computer table and bed. Especially now that Yi Tian had joined Guhan's family, Yi Tian, who could not fit a second bed, could only squeeze into one bed with Yu Wang. In particular, Yi Tian liked to drink. The whole house reeked of alcohol. Every time Yu Wang saw this scene, he would frown. He wanted to chase this tired guy out. After consuming the 3,000 essence sword pills he obtained from the dungeon, he now had 7,500 quarks of essence sword. In addition to the salary that Yarrow Guang gave him over the past few days, Ji Yuhan's essence sword had increased to 8,000 quarks. He was only 2,000 quarks away from the threshold of 10,000 quarks for a famed sword. If he worked hard and cleared a few dungeons with an SSS rank score, he would be able to gather 2,500 quarks of essence sword. At that time, Guhan would inevitably have to coordinate another Sword Maiden to return to the Sword Catacomb at the same time. This way, the small thatched hut would definitely be filled with 3 Sword Maidens. Thus, Guhan decided that he had to go to the Sword Catacomb Management Office today to upgrade his Sword Catacomb. He had to make at least a room with 3 bedrooms and 2 living rooms. As the only management office that had the authority to control the Sword Catacomb in the game, it was naturally crowded. Even though the management office had opened more than 30 service windows, it was a pity that it was still inadequate. Guhan took a quick look. There were more than 30 windows, and each of them had a queue of at least 50 to 60 meters. There were 400 to 500 people queuing in front of a window at the same time. If Guhan were to queue honestly, he didn't know if he could finish his Sword Catacomb by tomorrow afternoon. Of course, Guhan didn't have the time to waste here. He had a mission to complete in real life in the afternoon. Looking around, Guhan suddenly discovered that there was no one in front of a window. There wasn't even a single person queuing up. Guhan confirmed that the window was open, and there were NPCs sitting inside. It didn't look like a closed window. Guhan walked to the front of this window. Only then did he know the reason why there was no queue at this window. This was because there was a gilded sign hanging at the entrance of the queue. It said, "Players with less than 10 million in assets are not allowed to enter." Good heavens, the entry standard was 10 million renminbi. No wonder this window was empty. It turned out that this window was specially opened for the rich. Guhan glanced at his personal terminal. At this time, there was already 50 million in his account. It seemed to be more than enough to enter this passage. Thus, Guhan strode forward with his long legs and entered the tunnel. Dear player military governor, welcome to the official Sword Catacomb Management Office of Sword Maiden Online. Welcome to the special Sword Catacomb application window. The programmed NPC attendant saw Guhan and took the initiative to greet him. Guhan's research on the game was focused on things related to combat. There was very little research on Sword Catacombs, or rather, he didn't do any research at all. Hearing the NPC mention the special Sword Catacomb, Guhan was confused. What was a special Sword Catacomb? Special Sword Catacombs are rare or unique types of sword catacombs that are different from ordinary sword catacombs. The attendant seemed to have seen through Guhan's doubts and handed a document to Guhan from the windowsill. Dear player military governor, you can take a look at this document. All the special sword catacombs that have been released for sale this week are here. Guhan took the brochure from the NPC attendant and opened it. On the first page, there was a vermilion picture of an antique courtyard with annotations below. Antique courtyard set of the Ming dynasty's Jiangnan tycoons from the Middle Ages. It has a main hall, 2 kitchens, 3 public toilets, 3 large and small storerooms, 3 independent bedrooms, and a small garden. Finely renovated and has 1 hectare of land. 5 male and female NPCs will come with purchase, including a housekeeper, 2 maids, and 2 servants. The price is 10 million renminbi. 8 of the 10 sets have been sold. There are 2 left. Dear Player Military Governor, this antique courtyard set of the Ming Dynasty's Jiangnan Tycoons is very good. The architectural style and the furniture are completely antique. The 5 NPCs that come with it are experts in all kinds of housework. They can provide you and your sword lady with considerate service and ensure that you can enjoy a perfect and comfortable life in the sword catacomb. Most importantly, it comes with a hectare of land. You can build all kinds of buildings on this hectare of land. If you buy it now, we'll even throw in any of the blueprints of the racecourse, central sculpture and outdoor pool. It's definitely worth it. After the attendant's patient explanation, Guhan quickly understood the difference between the so-called special sword catacombs and ordinary sword catacombs. Ordinary sword catacombs were similar to apartment buildings. Although one could choose from a small room of 50 square meters to a mansion of thousands of square meters, that was all. The space was limited to the inside of the room. After opening the door, one would enter the game world. That was just a simple residence. However, the special mansion was different. Apart from having a variety of architectural styles and designs compared to ordinary sword catacombs, the 2 most important selling points of the special sword catacombs were the NPC servants and their own land. With NPC servants, players could enjoy the intoxicating life of a tycoon in ancient times. Meanwhile, players could build all kinds of strange vacation buildings on their own land, ranging from the smallest vegetable farm to the best mountain ski resort. Even the entire Pacific Ocean could be built on their own land. As long as you had the money, and as long as you could imagine it, you could build all these things on your own land. After reading this, Guhan could not help but sigh. No wonder many tycoons were unwilling to return to the real world. They would rather live in the game and die in the game. It was because the enjoyment of these special buildings was too exaggerated, far beyond the limits of enjoyment in the real world. In the real world, even if one was rich, without the identity of a sword-bearer, one would not be able to live in a house that was more than 600 square meters, let alone a racecourse or a swimming pool. This was because in the real world, every base city used an extremely limited amount of land to feed tens of millions of people. This extremely limited land had to be used by the sword-bearers who protected the survival of humans. As for the ordinary people who did not have the strength, as long as they did not die, they could continuously produce new people and continue the human civilization. Before Guhan became a sword-bearer, did he not live in a honeycomb house that was hundreds of stories high? Before he became a sword-bearer, even if one gave Guhan tens of millions, or even hundreds of millions, he would not be qualified to live in the core area, nor would he be qualified to enjoy the large space. The law had already stipulated that non-citizens could never live in a house that was more than 600 square meters. Once violated, they would be sent to prison for more than 10 years. Back to the special sword catacombs. These special sword catacombs looked magnificent and extremely tempting, but in comparison, the price to obtain a special sword catacomb was also very high. In this booklet, the cheapest Jiangnan tycoon-style courtyard started at 10 million renminbi. The more expensive, medieval Night Glory castle set, cost 80 million renminbi. The more expensive, complete imitation of Yangjing Prince Mansion set, directly raised the price to 1 billion renminbi. Finally, the most expensive one was the 600 years old Yangjing Forbidden City suite, which was worth 50 billion yuan. According to the explanation in the atlas, every grass, every tree, and every building in the Forbidden City Imperial Palace had been meticulously restored to ensure that every detail was exactly the same as the Forbidden City. There were a total of 9,999 rooms in the Forbidden City set, but only 24 of the main rooms were fully replicated. The players had to pay extra to purchase the rest of the rooms. For example, a decoration of the along the river during the Qingming festival would cost 5 million RMB, non-negotiable. In addition, there were 100 eunuchs, 100 palace maids, 200 imperial guards, 10 imperial doctors, 10 imperial chefs, 20 imperial concubines. What made Guhan want to ridicule the most were the 36 civil and military NPCs. Every morning, they would run to the throne room and shout "Long live the Emperor." Then, they would pretend to report to Guhan about all sorts of major events in the world. By the way, This forbidden city also had 10,000 hectares of land. If Guhan was interested, he could move to Yuanmingyuan, Summer Palace, Wanshou Palace, Zongnanhari, Huangshan, Taishan, Sanqing Mountain, Yangtze River, Yellow River, etc., as long as he had RMB. The reason why the system set these special sword graves to be so expensive was because of the pressure of collecting RMB. All along, the system had been releasing a huge amount of RMB. If it wasn't for the sword graves industry, the financial system of the game and the real world would have collapsed long ago. Mr. Military Governor, have you chosen? Which one do you want to buy? The service NPC looked at Guhan with a smile, but Guhan could feel that if he dared to say no, he would immediately be kicked out by this NPC. After Guhan left, Queen Yu, who still had her head buried in the blanket, was probably too tired and fell asleep again. When she slowly opened her eyes, she was shocked. The small thatched room had become an exquisitely carved and antique bedroom. Her bed had also changed from an iron bed to a high-grade wooden bed. There was a layer of pink chiffon hanging on both sides of the bed. Do you like it? Queen Yu turned around and saw Guhan looking at her with a smile. Do you like our new home? Guhan didn't want to line up at the normal window and didn't want his sword lady to live in the thatched room anymore. Although he still felt that it was a bit expensive, he still decided to spend 10 million to buy this sword grave. TSK, the current Guhan couldn't be compared to when he only had 9 million on him at the auction and had to scheme against the pitiful Hui Jian to get the heavenly sword's keepsake. Now that he had over 50 million, he casually threw out 10 million without batting an eyelid. Chapter 222. Dear friend, are you going out? In a room that was almost identical in layout and decoration to Ji Yu Han's new home, the tall cast Cloud Iron was holding the inside of an electric cooker, constantly shoving rice into his mouth with the big spoon in the cooker. At this moment, Cast Cloud Iron was talking to his sword wielder, Song Hammer. Yeah, I'm going out for a while. Song Hammer tightened his shoelaces. At this time, he was wearing a formal black suit, which was very rare for him. His hair was also neatly combed. His temperament instantly became a little low, as if he was going to attend a very formal and grand occasion. Take me with you. Cast Cloud Iron put down a large pot of rice, wiped his hands on his clothes, and prepared to go out with Song Hammer. Wait. Song Hammer laughed bitterly. Cast Cloud Iron, I can't go out with you today. Can you stay at home alone, or go out for a walk? Why? Why can't Cast Cloud Iron be with his close friend? When Cast Cloud Iron heard that Song Hammer wouldn't let him go out with him, he immediately became unhappy. Dear friend, you can't possibly have met another girl, right? Cast Cloud Iron muttered very loudly. Yes, there was no mistake in her words or her logic. She was just muttering loudly. While she was muttering, in her mind, she had already started to imagine Song Hammer meeting with girls or boys behind her back. Then, they would drink and chat together, talking about poetry and philosophy of life. My God, Cast Cloud Iron, what the hell are you thinking? Song Hammer laughed even more bitterly. Forget it, to tell you the truth, I'm going to meet my bad friend Guhan today, so I can't bring you along. Oh, you want to meet Guhan? Cast Cloud Iron's tone was light. It was obvious that she did not believe Song Hammer's words. Guhan and Cast Cloud Iron are also friends. Since you want to meet Guhan, then Cast Cloud Iron will go with you. Cast Cloud Iron has not seen Guhan for a long time. Cast Cloud Iron also wants to see her friend. Alright, stop messing around, I really can't bring you. Song Hammer's intention to refuse was very firm. Alright, I understand. Cast Cloud Iron hammered the table so hard that the entire table jumped up, scaring the personal maid who was preparing to clean up the rice cooker for Cast Cloud Iron. You didn't even go out with Ji Yu Han, did you? You were with another girl, a boy, right? I really am. Song Hammer was speechless. To have a sword lady like Cast Cloud Iron, Song Hammer regretted it so much that his intestines turned green. Alright, I'll tell you. Today is the death anniversary of Guhan's parents and sister. Guhan doesn't want too many people to disturb him. Do you understand? From the time Guhan and I got to know each other until today, Guhan would never allow anyone to go with him to worship his parents and sister. Even if it was my mother, father, brother, or sister, Guhan would never allow them to go. Do you understand? I made an agreement with Guhan that in this lifetime, only the two of us brothers will visit the graves of uncle and auntie. We will never bring anyone else. Song Hammer was like a machine gun. She spat out these words in anger. Word by word, she sprayed Cast Cloud Iron's face. Cast Cloud Iron, who was more than 2 meters tall and nearly 3 meters tall, was stupefied. Oh! Cast Cloud Iron was like a little lowly who had been wronged. She whispered, coyly, and aggrievedly said, I don't know. All right, you go. Come back quickly. I'll wait for you to come home for dinner. Ari. Song Hammer sighed and walked in front of the Cast Cloud Iron. After waiting for a while, seeing that the Cast Cloud Iron still had no reaction, she helplessly glared at the Cast Cloud Iron. What are you standing there for? Carry me. Oh. Cast Cloud Iron picked up Song Hammer. It looked like a mother carrying her own child. Don't worry and wait for me at home. I'll be back soon. Song Hammer hugged Cast Cloud Iron hard. It couldn't be helped. If he didn't let Cast Cloud Iron pick him up, Song Hammer wouldn't be able to touch Cast Cloud Iron's broad chest. A few minutes later, Song Hammer went downstairs and left the house. Cast Cloud Iron looked at her reluctantly, and then grabbed her rice pot from the exclusive maid who was cleaning the table. What are you cleaning up for? I haven't eaten enough yet. When Song Hammer arrived at the appointed place with Guhan, she was surprised to find that Guhan was not here. This was an incredible thing. In the past, when she went to visit Guhan's parents, Guhan would wait at the appointed place early, at least 20 minutes in advance. But today, with less than 5 minutes left, Guhan still didn't appear. Until there was only 1 minute left, Guhan finally arrived late. Song Hammer wanted to ask why Guhan, who had always been early, was so late, but thinking that this was the day to worship Guhan's parents, it seemed inappropriate to ask such a question. After thinking about it, she didn't ask this question. However, Guhan seemed to see Song Hammer's doubts. He lifted his hand into his child's pouch and pulled out Chingpin, who was wearing a plain white gauze dress with a silly smile. It's all because of this guy. She insisted on coming with me. I was in a stalemate with her for a while, which delayed the time. Hearing Guhan's explanation, Song Hammer's mouth unconsciously twitched a few times. Damn it, I spent a lot of effort to appease the one at home, making her give up the idea of coming out with me to attend Guhan's tomb sweeping ceremony. On the other hand, Guhan actually failed to stop Chingpin from tormenting him and brought her out. Didn't we agree to sweep graves together for the rest of our lives? Although he felt helpless in his heart, after all, they were Ji Yuhan's parents. If they wanted to bring someone over, that was their business. What did it have to do with him? Sigh, next time, how about I bring the Cast Cloud Iron over as well? Song Hammer thought to herself. Don't think about bringing Cloud Cast Iron next time. Guhan's sudden words startled Song Hammer. Chingpin is like my younger sister. She's my family member, different from your Cloud Cast Iron. TSK, look at how arrogant you are, you sour popsicle. Even if you want it, I'm not willing to bring her over. Song Hammer was speechless and could only retort helplessly. According to the rules of the council, after a human's death, the corpse couldn't stay in the city for even a moment. It had to be cremated immediately to prevent the crowd from crowding and causing a terrifying plague in the high-density city. After the corpse was cremated, the ashes could only be placed in the only peaceful residence hall in the city. No other places were allowed. In addition, the ashes could only be stored in the peaceful residence hall for 20 years at most. After 20 years, the council would find an empty space outside the city and scatter the ashes. They would then plant trees and cover the ashes with soil, allowing the human's body to completely return to nature. Of course, this rule didn't apply to sword bearers. If you became a sword bearer, you could place the ashes in the peaceful residence hall for as long as you wanted until there were no more sword bearers among you or your descendants. If your level is a bit higher, reaching spirit sword or above, then your ancestors' ashes don't need to be placed in the peaceful residence hall. You can directly bring them home to worship. The privileges of a sword wielder are clearly displayed here. However, the Chinese paid particular attention to burial, so most sword bearers wouldn't use this privilege. Instead, They would choose to scatter the ashes of their parents and ancestors under the trees like other ordinary people, returning them to this world. "Hello, do you have an appointment?" In the hall of the peaceful residence hall, an attendant asked with a smile. Because there were too many ashes stored in the peaceful residence hall, there was an endless stream of juniors who wanted to worship. There were too many people, and in the first few years, there was a very bad incident where the waiting time was too long. Therefore, the council issued a rule that every descendant was only allowed to worship their ancestors' ashes once a year, and they had to make an appointment in advance. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to enter the peaceful residence hall. Guhan didn't say anything. He just took out his personal terminal and scanned the scanner on the counter. He heard a ding sound from the scanner. "Respected sword bearer, please proceed to the exclusive sacrifice room 145 to carry out the sacrifice." This was still the privilege of the sword bearer. Without an appointment, they could worship their ancestors at any time. Seeing that Guhan was a sword bearer, the attendant's attitude became even more respectful. She lowered her head, bent over, and reached out a hand to lead Guhan to the exclusive sacrifice room 145. This exclusive sacrificial room sounded very awesome. It seemed to be very big, but in fact, it was only a small room that was less than 5 square meters. Jiyu Han and Song Hammer felt a little crowded inside. The layout of the exclusive sacrifice room was also very simple. There was a metal offering table with a small bronze cauldron on top of it. The table was close to a metal wall, and on the wall directly above the metal offering table, there was a small window that was dozens of centimeters square, just like the notch on the wall of a traditional farmer's courtyard where the kitchen god was placed. Ding. "Respected sword bearer, please place your personal terminal in front of the scanner to scan once." The computer voice in the sacrifice room spoke slowly. Different from the computer voice in other places, the computer voice here had a soft, slow, and sorrowful special effect. It was specially set to match the atmosphere of the sacrifice room. Guhan scanned his personal terminal and heard a series of mechanical movements. After dozens of seconds, a small rectangular box was carried into the opening on the wall by a tray. This box was very familiar to Guhan. It was his father's urn. When Guhan took the box down from the window and respectfully placed it on the offering table, his mother's and sister's urns were also transported to Guhan. This was the future high-precision sacrificial management system. The interior of the safe residence hall was like an enormous warehouse, and the cinerary urns were the goods in the warehouse. The sacrificers didn't need to search for their loved ones one by one like before the apocalypse. All they had to do was wait in the sacrificial room on the first floor, and the system would automatically deliver the cinerary urns to the sacrificers. It was unknown whether this was good or bad, but it was certain that this was a change that humans had no choice but to make after almost all of their homes were destroyed and occupied. Chapter 223. Guhan solemnly took out 3 memorial tablets from his dimensional pocket. They were written with the words Shenkao Jiyu Chuanqiu Fu Jun, Shenkao Jiyu Ruyua Old Madam of the Li family, and Shenkao Jiyu Yun Virgin Girl. Guhan knelt on the ground and walked to the sacrificial table. He placed the 3 memorial tablets neatly on it, and then took out a variety of seasonal fruits, rice, pork, delicacies, fish, and other offerings that Guhan could get. Finally, he solemnly took out a plate of steaming hot dishes from his dimensional pocket. Among the golden potatoes, there were pieces of tender and attractive shredded meat. This was a plate of sour and spicy shredded potatoes that Wen Maiyun had just fried. After finishing all this, Guhan came back on his knees and grabbed the soft flesh on the neck of Qingpin, who was sleeping with her eyes closed in the nursery bag. He lifted her out of the bag and placed her on a cushion beside him. "Kneel down," Guhan ordered in a low voice, causing Qingpin to tremble and wake up from her daze. She opened her eyes in a daze and saw Guhan's sad and painful face, like a small sapling that had lost all its green leaves in June and was covered with scars. "Guhan, what's wrong with you?" Qingpin suddenly felt very painful in her heart, as if she had lost the most important thing. "Guhan, don't be like this. Guhan, smile." Qingpin stood up and wanted to jump into Guhan's arms to find some warmth, but Guhan pulled her away without hesitation, pressed her shoulders, and made her kneel on the ground again. Kneel down, and kowtow. Guhan's voice was choked with sobs. Guhan, you're crying. Why are you crying? Qingpin actually saw tears rolling in Guhan's eyes, and drops of tears the size of beans fell from her eyes. The heartache he felt just now was getting stronger and more painful. It was as if he had lost Guhan. Guhan, don't cry. Qingpin wants to cry too. Guhan, don't cry. Qingpin is in pain. Qingpin doesn't want you to cry. Qingpin broke free from Guhan's grasp and threw himself in front of Guhan, who was kneeling on the ground. He raised his head and stared at Guhan's tear-stained face. Kneel. Guhan grabbed Qingpin's neck and forced her to kneel on the ground again. But just as he loosened his grip, Qingpin forced himself to stand up and threw himself into Guhan's arms. A pair of small hands rubbed Guhan's face randomly, and Guhan's tears were smeared all over his face. No, Qingpin doesn't want to see Guhan cry. Qingpin doesn't want Guhan to cry. Qingpin doesn't want Guhan to cry. Qingpin's words suddenly poked the tears in Guhan's heart. He thought of the last moment of his life and the words his mother said to him. Mother, mother, father, sister. Guhan misses all of you. Guhan misses all of you. Guhan really misses all of you. Come out and see Guhan. Guhan really misses all of you. At that moment, Guhan broke down. He was like a helpless baby. His entire body slumped to the ground. He slapped the ground and wailed. The entire level seemed to be able to hear his loud and shocking cries. At that moment, Guhan was no longer the glorious, decisive, famous, invincible newbie, leader of the new generation, who defeated Kanglan Billows and completed the Emperor Sword Grade quest. He was no longer the newbie swordsman who relied on the 9 swords of mysterious heaven to defeat Rat, Tiger, Ghost, and Spirit level 4 Yuan Ku. He was just a pitiful child who missed his parents and sister so much that he was going crazy. Guhan. Guhan. Don't cry. You. 2 drops of tears suddenly rolled down Qingpin's cheeks. The swordsman and his sword lady were connected. Their emotions were connected and affected each other. The great sorrow in Guhan's heart passed through the sword mark and was deeply transmitted into Qingpin's heart. It caused the usually cute and invincible guy to tear up. Sigh, Qingpin, just be quiet for a while. Let Guhan cry here alone. Song Hammer, who had been watching from the side, let out a long sigh. He carried Qingpin to his side. It's been 12 years. Every year, he cries like this. Perhaps this is the only way to relieve the pain and sorrow that Guhan has accumulated over the past year. Qingpin, these tablets erected here are your family. They are as close to you as Guhan. Kneel down and kowtow to them. Consider it your filial piety. Song Hammer said to Qingpin. Qingpin nodded, not fully understanding. But, if Qingpin kowtows, something bad will happen. What could be bad? Even if it's bad, it can't be worse than Guhan's current state. Song Hammer let out another long sigh. He ignored Qingpin and also knelt down respectfully. He kowtowed to the tablets of Guhan's parents. Guhan's mother, Guhan's father, Guhan's little sister. When I was a child, my family was poor. You helped me grow up. If you have Guhan to eat, you won't be stingy with me. You are my parents. Guhan is my biological brother. I, Song Hammer, swear that I will accompany Guhan, take care of his life, and help him get through all the hardships in life. We will be good brothers and good gay friends for life. Please rest assured in heaven. I, Song Hammer, will do what I say. Song Hammer kowtowed to the tablets of the 3 people with sincerity. When Song Hammer was a child, he had some problems and his family situation was very bad. He relied on the help of his neighbors, Guhan's family. Otherwise, he would have been sent to an orphanage and become a motherless child. Therefore, the relationship between Song Hammer and Guhan was very good. His relationship with Guhan's parents was also very good. He was like a younger brother of Guhan. On the other side, when Qingpin saw Guhan and Song Hammer kneeling on the ground, he rolled his eyes. He felt that it was not good for him to do this. Coupled with the endless sorrow in Guhan's heart, Qingpin finally took the initiative to kneel before the tablets of Guhan's parents. After hesitating for a long time, he finally kowtowed to the tablets of the three people. The moment Qingpin's head touched the ground, he heard a loud roar. Then, a huge fire exploded from the altar. The power was so great that the whole house began to shake. Mother! The sudden explosion awakened Guhan from endless sorrow. He stood up abruptly and was stunned. The whole sacrificial room, which was connected to 3 or 4 other sacrificial rooms nearby, had been burnt by the explosion. Huge smoke and dust filled the sky. The automatic fire extinguishing system on the roof also sensed the appearance of the fire and began to spray water mist to extinguish the fire. What's going on? What happened? The staff of Unju Hall rushed in immediately and saw the sacrificial room where Guhan was in a mess. Strange, how could there be an explosion? The staff scratched his head in bewilderment. Also, what is this dust all over the sky? They did not notice that the 3 urns that were originally placed on the table had all disappeared, or rather, they had all exploded, leaving only a pile of wood fragments here. Mother! Guhan, who noticed all this, felt his vision go black and he fell down. Guhan, are you okay? Guhan slowly opened his eyes and found himself in a place that looked like an office. Song Hammer was sitting beside him, and Qing Po was curled up into a ball on the sofa. He was unusually quiet. You're awake. A strange man walked to Guhan and patted him on the shoulder. Since you're awake, come and deal with the problem with me. The person who spoke was a policeman near Unju Hall. It was not a small incident to burn down 4 sacrificial rooms of Unju Hall, so the policeman invited the unconscious Guhan, Song Hammer, and the others to the police station to deal with these thorny problems. After waking up, Guhan seemed to have completely recovered his calmness. He followed the policeman to the opposite side of the desk and began to be questioned by the policeman. Do you know how the fire started? The police officer asked straightforwardly. I don't know. Guhan shook his head. Then did you bring any flammable or explosive items here, such as firecrackers, yellow paper, candles, and so on? No. Guhan acted very stupefied. Sigh. That's strange. The police officer nodded and shook his head in distress. Then, he pushed a video in front of Guhan. Guhan took a look and saw that it was the entire video recorded by the cameras nearby when he was worshipping. At first, the video was very normal. 3 urns were sent out, then Guhan placed the offerings, then he cried and fell in front of the sacrificial table. Song Hammer also kowtowed. Finally, when Qingpin also kowtowed, the accident happened instantly. The second after Qingpin kowtowed, the 3 urns exploded from the inside at the same time, covering all 4 sacrificial rooms nearby. After that, the ashes of the explosion scattered all over the sky, even the camera became blurred. After watching the video, Guhan took a few steps back and almost fell to the ground. Seeing his parents' urns explode with his own eyes, no one could accept such a terrible ending. Mister, please restrain your grief and take care of yourself. Don't worry, we will definitely find out the ins and outs of the matter. The policeman saw Guhan's heartbroken look and couldn't help but say with concern. Thank you. Guhan nodded with difficulty. Can I go now? Of course, the rest is up to us, the police, but if there is anything we need to assist in the investigation, please cooperate with the police. The policeman gestured for Guhan to leave. Although Guhan himself was suspected of committing a crime, the possibility was too low. And in this era, it was very easy for the police to find you. There was no need to worry about Guhan absconding. Where could you run to? Did you have the ability to leave the safety of Yuzhang City? A few minutes later, Guhan and Song Hammer left the police station, followed by Qingpin, who was walking silently. Hammer, you go back first. I want to find a place to be alone. Guhan first said this to Song Hammer. Song Hammer expressed his understanding and told Guhan to look on the bright side and not be sad. Tomorrow, he still had to go out of the city for practical training. After that, he left Guhan. After watching Song Hammer leave, Guhan strode in one direction, completely ignoring Qingpin who was following him. Guhan, wait for me, Qingpin shouted and followed behind Guhan. Chapter 224. Ji Han silently walked into the park alone. This was a small park that was not big, probably not even 3,000 square meters in area. Under a few rows of green trees, there was a crooked man-made stream flowing through. On the side of the stream, there were more than 10 benches for pedestrians to rest. In this base city, which was made up of reinforced concrete and had an explosive population, parks were a rare resource. All the space had to be vacated to build honeycomb buildings for human habitation. Only a little bit of land was used to build luxurious things like parks. In the non-core area of Yuzhong City, there were only 5 such small parks and a larger central park. This was considered good. In Yangjing Base City, which had a population of more than 30 million, all the small parks had been completely flattened and built into skyscrapers, except for the central park. It was said that the tallest honeycomb building in Yangjing had exceeded 2,000 meters and had a record of 4,000 households and 30,000 people living in it. This was because the park's resources were so precious. In the past, the park was always overcrowded. Unless one deliberately waited for a few hours, it was impossible to have a chance to sit on the dozens of benches. However, at this time, half of the benches were empty. The rest were almost all elderly people and mothers with children. There was not a single young person in sight. This was a very strange and unscientific thing. "Hubby, let's rest here for a while, okay? It's rare that there's an empty spot here." A couple hurriedly walked past Guhan. When the wife saw the empty bench, she quickly grabbed her husband's hand, wanting to stop and look at the rare green. "What are you looking at? My brothers are waiting for us. In 17 minutes, the dungeon will officially open. We'll come to this kind of place every day. Today, it's more important to go and clear the dungeon. I read the military governor's strategy yesterday. I can't take it anymore. I want to fly to the sky on a nuclear bomb. This is what a man should do." When the husband talked about the nuclear bomb, his face turned red with excitement. Obviously, the nuclear bomb was something that men could not resist. The wife's face was full of helplessness. She did not understand why her husband was so passionate about the nuclear bomb and the new dungeon, but she obviously could not stop her husband's desire to go home. She heard that Merlin in the game was a rare handsome man. She had also made an appointment with her sisters to see how handsome Merlin was. From the couple's behavior, it was more or less clear why there were so few young people in this previously bustling park. After 24 hours, the new dungeon, King Arthur's Betrayal, was about to be officially opened. Everyone could not wait to experience the new dungeon. The couple would never have imagined that the military governor, who had caused such a stir, was walking past them like a zombie. Behind Guhan was a cute Qingpin who was trying hard to follow Guhan with his short legs. It was probably because Guhan was tired. Seeing an empty seat, Guhan directly sat on it. Qingpin followed closely behind Guhan and jumped onto the seat. "Guhan, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you talking to Qingpin? Qingpin's legs are sore from walking." Qingpin wants Guhan to hug Qingpin. Qingpin stood on Guhan's thigh and rubbed Guhan's face, trying to get a response from Guhan. However, Guhan did not respond to Qingpin at all. This was very normal. After seeing the ashes of their loved ones explode, no one would be able to accept this fact. Ji Han was able to not cry and jump like a madman. He did not shout or scream. He only did not say a single word. He was already very calm. However, it was strange that Guhan could cry so sadly when he was worshipping his parents. However, now that there were no bones left, Guhan did not shed a single tear. This was also a very strange thing. In fact, this involved very complicated psychological activities and changes. When the urn exploded in front of Guhan and the ashes flew all over the sky, Guhan's sadness and despair could not be controlled at all. In other words, Guhan's brain center could not withstand this burst of emotions. Therefore, Guhan fainted immediately. However, when he fainted, Guhan was not really in a state of lethargy. On the contrary, his thoughts were particularly active. In this dreamlike environment, Guhan cried helplessly for a long time. In the midst of his long sobbing, 3 warm voices suddenly woke Ji Han up. He raised his head and saw his parents and sister standing in front of him, smiling warmly at him. Father, mother, your son is unfilial. Not only did your son not avenge you, your son also harmed you. Ji Yuhan couldn't continue. He knelt in front of his parents and kowtowed with all his might, begging for relief from the guilt in his heart. Han, there is no need. We have seen what you have done for so many years. You have suffered. His mother, Li Ruyue, took Guhan into her arms and gently stroked Guhan's head like a baby. Once again returning to his mother's arms, Guhan quickly calmed down. His heart, which had been like a storm, gradually calmed down. Our biggest wish is that you can find a considerate wife and live a peaceful life for the rest of your life. However, my Han is so ambitious. He wants to be the savior of mankind. As a mother, I am really happy. I am proud to have such a son, his mother said softly. Mother, do you also know my dream? Mother, believe me. I will kill all the transformers and use their fire seeds as a sacrifice to your souls in heaven. Guhan gnashed his teeth. Yuan Ku, who had broken into the shelter and slaughtered the entire shelter, were the Yuan Ku transformers from the movie Alliance. Guhan had vowed countless times that he would kill the entire Transformers group and the Yuan Ku of the movie Alliance, leaving no one alive. Han, if you say that, it will be difficult for us to leave here happily. Li Ruyue's face was full of worry. This is the fate of us humans. As long as you live happily, it is better than anything else. Don't do something stupid. No, if your departure is fate, then this child's battle is also fate. Either I die on this land, or I kill them all. Apart from this, there is no other way. Ji Yuhan said through clenched teeth. Han, we don't want you to do this. Li Ruyue still wanted to persuade Guhan, but she was stopped by a hand. Well, this is the path that the child has chosen. Let's not interfere with him. If he wants to avenge us, let him go. Only in this way can Guhan's heart really be happy. The one who spoke was Guhan's father, Jiyu Chuanqiu, a slightly chubby man who looked gentle. Dad. Guhan threw himself at Jiyu Chuanqiu's feet and kowtowed a dozen times. Dad, if I don't kill all these Yuan Ku, I will not be happy for the rest of my life. Dad, forgive me for being unfilial. This hatred is the only pillar that has supported me to live until now. Without this hatred, I will definitely not be able to live. Is that so? Jiyu Chuanqiu smiled and shook his head. He lovingly touched Guhan's forehead. But we found that in your heart, a new pillar has grown. Look at the ground under your feet. Guhan lowered his head and saw that on the originally pitch-black ground, there was suddenly 3 emerald green shoots that broke out of the ground. Then, they began to grow rapidly. One of them grew to knee height and stopped growing. It was like a tender seedling that could be broken at any time. The other one grew to waist height. The trunk was also as thick as a finger. There were even 3 or 4 leaves extending from both sides of the trunk. This was already close to the standard of a sapling. The last one grew the longest. It had already surpassed Guhan's height. On a few scattered branches, dozens of leaves were swaying in the wind. Wow, so beautiful. Big brother, so beautiful. Jiyu Yun, who had been hiding behind her parents, jumped out excitedly when she saw the 3 saplings. She waved her hands excitedly around the 3 green plants in the dark. Little Yun. Guhan suddenly hugged Jiyu Yun into his arms. Then, he desperately hugged her tender body into his body. It was as if he wanted to fuse little Yun into his body. Little Yun, Big brother missed you so much. Little Yun, Big brother has hot and sour shredded potatoes for you to eat every day. Stay and accompany Big brother, okay? Okay. Don't. Big brother is so lecherous. Big brother is so bad, so bad. Jiyu Yun playfully struggled in Jiyu Han's embrace. This beautiful and warm scene made Li Ruyue and her husband smile in satisfaction as they looked at Jiyu Chuanqiu. Guhan, look at these 3 saplings. Although they are still very young, one day, they will grow into towering trees. They will be deeply planted in your body and become the pillars for you to live in this world. Jiyu Chuanqiu patted Guhan's shoulder. Even without us, you can still rely on them to survive. In the future, there will be more trees planted here. There will be more pillars to support your body and let you live with an indomitable spirit. Do you understand? I understand. Although Guhan was unwilling, he still nodded. He already understood what these 3 saplings meant. Indeed, the current him was no longer the same Guhan who relied on the hatred of his parents to mercilessly kill Kanzu in the first chapter. If he could go back to the first day he entered the game, Ji Yuhan wondered if he would stab with his sword without hesitation. Father. Guhan suddenly remembered something. He hugged Ji Yun and knelt on the ground again in front of Ji Chuanqiu. Father, I have a request. What is it? Ji Chuanqiu was stunned. This was the first time Guhan had asked him for a favor. I only ask that you don't blame Qingpin. Everything that happened today is on me. Please don't be angry at Qingpin, please. With Ji Yuhan's intelligence, with just a little thought, he knew that 90% of the blame for the explosion of the ashes today was on poor Qing. Chapter 225. Guhan, don't worry, we are not unreasonable people. Although this matter was indeed caused by your sword maiden, Qingpin. Ji Chuanqiu paused. In fact, the 3 of us still have to thank her. If it wasn't for her, I'm afraid we would not be able to free ourselves for the rest of our lives. Free? Guhan raised his head in confusion. He did not understand why his parents could not be freed. Guhan, do you know? For the past 12 years, the hatred in your heart was too strong. It was so strong that it bound our souls to your side, making it impossible for us to free ourselves and leave this world to go to the pure land of ultimate bliss. Ji Chuanqiu sighed. For the past 12 years, we have been bound to your side. Although we can see you grow step by step, we have also seen all the suffering you have gone through. As your father, I feel very pained to see you mistreat yourself like this. Father. Guhan did not expect his hatred to be so strong. It was actually strong enough to keep his parents' souls by his side. However, Guhan was a little happy. If he continued to maintain his hatred, would his parents be able to stay by his side forever? Don't think about those stupid ideas. Haven't you harmed us enough? Ji Chuanqiu patted Guhan's head. These 12 years have been like being in prison. Your mother and I have had enough. This time, thanks to your sword maiden, we have broken the urn that bound us. From now on, we can free ourselves from this kind of life that is neither human nor ghost. We can go to another world that belongs to us. Father, don't go. Guhan hurriedly pulled on Ji Chuanqiu's sleeve. Don't go. Stay by Guhan's side, okay? Don't go, okay? It's useless, child. Just like how your hatred binds us, your sword maiden helps us free ourselves. All of this is fated. We can't force it. Child, we don't have much time left. We are about to leave this place. To be able to see you one last time in your dream and talk to you so much, your mother, your sister and I are already very satisfied. This is the best ending. Yes. Father. Guhan lowered his head. He already understood his parents' intentions. He had no right to keep his parents by his side. They were already dead, and it was time for them to go to the world they belonged to. Letting their parents go where they want to go was what a filial child should do. It's almost time. Child, there are a few last things that I have to tell you. Ji Chuanqiu's expression was a little more urgent. Child, I believe that you have experienced these past few days. Our Ji family's bloodline is not to be underestimated. You must make good use of your bloodline and not be like our ancestors. Otherwise, it will be another disaster. Ji Chuanqiu said. Hearing his father talk about bloodlines, Guhan hurriedly stood up. Father, what is the origin of our Ji family's bloodline? Why can't I find a single clue even after 12 years of investigation? Father, do you know this secret? Ji Chuanqiu shook his head. Our ancestors taught us that if our descendants do not become sword bearers, then they will be able to pass on this secret before they die. If our descendants become unfilial and become sword bearers, then this secret will be buried forever. At least, I will not be able to tell you. But father, I am very confused about my own situation right now. When I was practicing the 3 green lotus blades, there were all kinds of problems. If I knew the origin of my bloodline, Then maybe these problems would be solved. Father, please tell me. Child, if you are so curious, then go find the answer yourself. Gu Chuanqiu was halfway through his sentence when his face suddenly froze. Not good, time is up. We have to go. Child, goodbye. Li Ruyue could not help but wipe away her tears. She kissed Guhan on the cheek and took Jiu Yun from Guhan's arms. Child, other fathers cannot help you. If it is a problem with the 3 green lotus blades, then go find the green lotus sword fairy. Only he can help you. Remember, only he can help you. Leaving behind this last sentence, Jiu Chuanqiu, Li Ruyue, and Jiu Yun's voices were like clouds, instantly disappearing. Don't go, don't go. Just like what was described in the previous chapter, Guhan shouted these words and woke up from his sleep. Only then did Guhan realize that he had been in an unbelievable dream. After he communicated with the police with reason, he had been separated from Song Hammer for a long period of time, walking to the park, and finally sitting on the bench. All of this had been controlled by Guhan's subconscious. Guhan's main consciousness had been immersed in the memories and thoughts of the dream. Logically speaking, dreams were not real. They were just projections of one's subconscious in one's mind. This was a very reasonable explanation. Guhan's longing for his parents had not stopped for the past 12 years. And after experiencing the explosion of the urn, which had caused one to collapse, it was very reasonable for Guhan to dream of his parents while he was unconscious. And the words his parents had said to him could also be understood as Guhan's own thoughts. He was just using his parents to tell him and comfort him. This kind of explanation was in line with scientific reasoning. It was impeccable, and could not be refuted or doubted. But Guhan's consciousness told him that this was not the case. The parents that appeared in his dream were not illusions, but real. They were the souls of his parents. Guhan could clearly remember every expression and tone of his parents when they spoke to him. This was not something that could be imagined by his own imagination. More importantly, his father had told him at the end that if he wanted to learn the 3 green lotus swords, he had to find the green lotus sword fairy. But in his memory, the green lotus sword fairy had never appeared. Perhaps Guhan would forget those below the fairy sword fairy level, but Guhan dared to swear that all of their names were hidden in his heart. He did not forget any of them. However, there was no such person as the green lotus sword fairy in Guhan's memory. Guhan was 100% sure of this. Since the green lotus sword fairy did not exist in his memory, it meant that his father, who had taken the initiative to mention the name of the green lotus sword fairy, could not have been a character created by his subconscious. This was because the name did not exist in his subconscious at all. If that was the case, then his father must have really come to his dream. In fact, it was very simple to find out whether his parents' souls had really come or the result of his subconscious. He just needed to find the green lotus sword fairy. After finding the green lotus sword fairy, he would ask him about the 3 green lotus swords. Just by looking at the names of the green lotus sword fairy and the 3 green lotus swords, one could tell that there was a deep connection between the two. Next, Guhan hypothesized that if his father was not created by his subconscious and was real, then the other things that his father had said to him were also true. Then, was his hatred really so terrifying that it could control the souls of his father, mother, and sister and prevent them from transcending? Was his hatred so terrifying that it could control the souls of his father, mother, and sister and prevent them from transcending? Guhan recalled his life for the past 12 years and could not help but smile bitterly. This was the truth. If his hatred was poured out, the entire Yuzhang city would not be able to contain it. Also, the transcendence that his father had mentioned, the other world. Could it be that after humans died, they would really go to hell and heaven? In Yuan-Ku, there was no lack of Yama King, Satan, and other legendary figures in charge of hell. However, they were just descriptions from the 2D world. They couldn't really prove the existence of hell and heaven. However, many Jendi had revealed to the world before they died that they would feel the call of a mysterious place before they died. They could be 100% sure that when they died, they would be summoned to that place. As for whether it was heaven, hell, or another battlefield, that was a secret that no one knew. Finally, what puzzled Guhan was Qingpin's question. After watching the live video, Guhan was almost 100% sure that the culprit of all this was the adorable Qingpin. It was because of her kowtow that caused the ashes of his parents and sister to explode instantly. Although his parents told him not to blame Qingpin, and Qingpin had helped his parents to free themselves from the shackles of Guhan's hatred, when Guhan thought of his parents' ashes flying in the sky, he could not help but feel distressed. Guhan did not blame Qingpin, because Qingpin's kowtow was completely forced by him, and it was not something she was willing to do. But Guhan was very puzzled. Why could Qingpin's small kowtow cause such a terrible result? There was no physical contact at all, and Qingpin did not use any sword essence either. The ashes just exploded like a mouse seeing a cat. Just a kowtow from Qingpin made it explode uncontrollably. Guhan could not help but think of the battle a week ago. He thought of the little demonic beast that lost its ability to fly after being touched by Qingpin. Forget it, I will properly test Qingpin's ability when I get home. Qingpin's origin has always been so mysterious. I'm afraid there are too many things hidden in it. Thinking of this, Ji Yuhan slowly awoke from his deep thoughts. His face that was as stiff as a corpse gradually regained its vitality. Qingpin, let's go home. Guhan stood up and shouted, but then he frowned. Where was Qingpin? Guhan walked around the entire park, and Qingpin's figure completely disappeared. This was a big problem. Chapter 226. Although Qingpin was missing, Guhan was not in a hurry. This was because the author did not intend to use Qingpin's disappearance to create a dozen chapters. Oh, no, it was because there was a swordmark connection between Qingpin and Guhan. With this telepathic connection, Guhan could sense it and easily find his own sword lady. If not, he could directly control the sword mark to make Qingpin return. As long as Guhan waved his hand, Qingpin would turn into a sword and automatically fly back to Guhan's hand. However, Guhan did not intend to use this labor-saving method. He intended to work harder and personally find Qingpin. Guhan was very curious about the reason for Qingpin's disappearance. Following the connection between him and Qingpin, Guhan found that Qingpin was still in a state of movement, and the speed of movement was not slow. As time went by, Guhan walked closer and closer to the edge of the city. This was very strange. Why would Qingpin inexplicably approach the edge of the city? After walking for about 20 minutes, Guhan had arrived under the city wall of Yuzhang City. Yes, Yuzhang City was clearly 1,000 years in the future, but it was like 1,000 years in the feudal era, with towering city walls. This city wall was about 100 meters high and more than 10 meters thick. It was completely made of reinforced concrete. Even if a cannon was used to blast a corner of this city wall, it would be difficult to destroy it. Generally speaking, ordinary reinforced concrete could defend against human attacks, but it could not defend against Yuan Ku's attack. Yuan Ku could easily use their bodies between the dimensional gaps to pass through any human defensive building. Even if you built a city wall that was thousands of meters high and hundreds of meters thick, it would still be of no use. However, it would be different if dimensional crystals were added to the city wall. After mixing a certain proportion of dimensional crystal powder into the cement, the situation would be different. This proportion was not high, and a ratio of about 0.13% would be sufficient. After mixing dimensional crystal powder, the wall would have the ability to seal the dimensional cracks, and Yuan Ku would no longer be able to pass through the wall. They would have to use their own strength like ordinary humans to destroy the defense of these city walls. However, for a long time, the task of defending against Yuan Ku was handed over to the dimensional barrier outside the city wall. These city walls would not be able to defend for long after the barrier was broken. They were more used to delay time and prevent humans from escaping from the city. Every year, many humans could not endure the restrictions of life in the base city and tried to enter the outside world. However, they would be blocked by this formidable wall, and they would be arrested by the police and sent to prison. After being sent to prison, these people would be satisfied if they wanted to escape from the base city. They would be sent by the police to a collective farm outside the city to undergo labor reform. After being sentenced to a few years, they would work in the collective farm for a few years. If they encountered Yuan Ku invading the farm and causing their deaths, then sorry to say that they were unlucky. In any case, they would also end up like this when they escaped from the base city. When Guhan arrived at the bottom of the city wall, he saw many police officers patrolling around the city wall. These police officers were looking at Guhan with vigilant eyes. If Guhan wanted to do anything to cross the city wall, he would be arrested on the spot by these police officers. Unfortunately, Guhan did not intend to contribute to human agriculture. According to Guhan's senses, Qingpin should not be far from him. Or rather, it should be within a kilometer of him. I found her. That little girl is over there. All of you, follow me. Suddenly, a police officer who looked like the captain shouted. 5 or 6 police officers near Guhan collectively followed the captain. When Guhan heard that it was a little girl, he was 80% sure that it should be his Qingpin. Therefore, Guhan trotted behind the police officers and ran into a small alley by the city wall. At this time, the alley had been blocked. In addition to more than a dozen police officers surrounding the alley, there were also dozens of onlookers craning their necks to look inside. Guhan blended into the crowd of onlookers and looked into the alley. Sure enough, his own Qingpin was blocked inside. At this time, Qingpin was standing with her hands on her waist. Her small body was casually facing the encirclement of more than a dozen police officers. Guhan also noticed that behind Qingpin, there was a little girl who was even smaller than Qingpin. Her head was down and she had fainted behind Qingpin. This little girl's body was covered with all kinds of bruises, and there were bloody scars. At first glance, it was obvious that she had been extremely abused and beaten. Little girl, hurry up and surrender. Otherwise, the police uncle will arrest you and send you to the police station, the police officer who called people over just now said to Qingpin in an official tone. This made Guhan very curious. What did Qingpin do to provoke the police to arrest her? Hey hey hey. Qingpin stuck out her tongue at these police officers. No, I won't surrender. Except for Guhan, no one can make Qingpin surrender. No, even if Guhan comes, Qingpin will not surrender. Who is Guhan? Do you know? I don't know. I've never heard of this person. Several police officers whispered. After being glared at by the captain, they bitterly shut their mouths. Little girl, hurry up and get out of the way. Do you know that you are committing a crime? If you commit a crime, you will be arrested by the police uncle and sent to prison. You will never be able to watch cartoons again, the police captain said with the usual routine. No, Qingpin will never get out of the way. Qingpin will not let you bully her again. Qingpin opened her hands, like an old hen protecting a chick, protecting the little girl who was covered with bruises and bruises behind her. It turned out that the reason why Qingpin provoked the police was because he wanted to protect the little girl behind him from being taken away by the police. Little girl, you don't know that none of us will bully her. We just want to send her back to her sword bearer. This little girl is not an ordinary girl. She is a sword mistress. She has just experienced a very cruel battle and suffered very serious injuries. She needs her master to send her to the maintenance workshop for maintenance and repair. The police captain persuaded earnestly. Behind the captain, a shifty-eyed guy dressed in branded clothing and wearing a personal terminal for a sword mistress shouted, "Yes, police comrade, my sword mistress has suffered a very serious injury and needs to be repaired immediately. You guys quickly arrest this unreasonable little girl and return my sword mistress to me." It seemed that this shifty-eyed guy was the sword mistress of the little girl who was covered with bruises and bruises. His lying. Qingpin clearly saw this man whipping her with all his might in the forest in the park. He didn't even wear pants. The injuries on her body were caused by this man. Qingpin said loudly, "Is that so?" The police captain turned around and looked at the man suspiciously. Realizing that the police had begun to suspect him, the man immediately panicked. He extended his personal terminal for the police to see. "Police comrade, look carefully. This is the personal terminal for a sword mistress. I am a sword mistress, how can a sword mistress lie?" Sigh. The police captain sighed slightly. Although he also felt that there were many suspicious points, there was one thing that the man was right about. How could a sword mistress lie? Even if this sword mistress really wanted to do some ugly things to this poor little girl, he could only help him arrest this little girl. According to the law, only the discipline committee of the Sword Council had the authority to investigate the sword mistress. As a police captain who could only manage civilians, he had no right to go against the sword mistress. You guys, arrest this little girl and bring her back. The police captain had no choice but to order his men to arrest her. However, he also reminded them, remember, don't hurt this little girl. She's a good girl. Yes. The few policemen looked at each other. They were all experienced policemen. This sword mistress was obviously suspicious. This little girl named Qingpin was probably telling the truth. But what could they do? Could they offend a sword mistress? Perhaps on the surface, the sword mistress wouldn't do anything to a small policeman because of the discipline committee. But in the dark, they had plenty of ways to deal with them. The discipline committee wouldn't care about these trivial matters. In the end, they and their families would suffer. Therefore, these policemen went against their conscience to arrest Qingpin. At this time, Gu Han, who was watching from the crowd, knew that he had to make an appearance. He wasn't afraid that the policeman would hurt his Qingpin. If a sword mistress was hurt by the policeman, then Qingpin would be a disgrace to the sword mistress. He was afraid that Qingpin would hurt these policemen. The policeman's hesitant expressions and the police captain's instructions to not let Qingpin get hurt were heard by Gu Han. Gu Han knew that these policemen were also helpless. Stop. Gu Han pushed aside the crowd in front of him and walked out. As soon as Qingpin saw Gu Han, she immediately cheered and waved and shouted, Gu Han, Qingpin is here. Gu Han, you finally came. Qingpin has been waiting anxiously. Hurry up and tell these idiots that Qingpin is telling the truth. This was Gu Han. After hearing Qingpin say Gu Han's name countless times, the policemen turned their heads to see who this Gu Han was. It turned out that he was a handsome young man. Okay, I know what you said is the truth. Thank you for your hard work. Gu Han smiled bitterly and slowly walked toward Qingpin. Wait, who are you? This is a crime scene, you can't get close. A policeman wanted to stop Gu Han, but the older policeman next to him grabbed his sleeve. Don't mess around. Didn't you see his personal terminal? The younger policeman only noticed that Gu Han also had the personal terminal of a swordsman after the older policeman reminded him. It seemed that this Gu Han was also a swordsman. No wonder this little girl was so fearless. She also had a swordsman behind her. It was a pity that the policeman with no background like us had to suffer in the middle of these two swordsmen. Thank you for your hard work. You did a great job. Gu Han picked up Qingpin and kissed her on the cheek. Then he smiled at the policeman and said, What do you want to do with my sword mistress? Chapter 227. This young lady is a sword mistress. The policemen looked at each other. They did not expect that the young lady who was confronting them with her hands on her waist was actually a sword mistress. The policeman suddenly started sweating profusely. According to the law, a sword mistress could retaliate at will when threatened by a human without being held responsible. In other words, if they really tried to capture this sword mistress and were killed by her, they would only have themselves to blame. No one would stand up for them. What are you guys doing? Hurry up and save my sword mistress. Hurry up and help her, the shifty-eyed sword mistress yelled. This made the policeman even more uncomfortable. There was still a sword mistress behind them who was asking them to save the sword mistress who was covered in cuts and bruises. With sword mistresses on both sides, the policemen looked disgusted as if they had just eaten shit. No matter which side they sided with, they would be the unlucky ones in the end. Forget it, you guys don't have to interfere. Let me talk to this sword mistress, Gu Han said with a wave of his hand. The policemen immediately retreated to the side as if they had been pardoned from a crime. Well, this kind of thing should be solved by you sword mistresses, or you could ask your disciplinary committee for help. What does it have to do with poor policemen like us? As the policemen retreated, the alley suddenly turned into a standoff between Gu Han and the shifty-eyed sword mistress. As the stalemate began, beads of sweat began to form on the shifty-eyed swordsman's forehead. Even though his face seemed calm, His twitching muscles indicated that his heart wasn't as calm as he presented himself. On the other side, Guhan was full of smiles. He looked like a smiling Maitreya Buddha. "What's your name?" Ji Han suddenly asked the swordsman in front of him. "Bai Jie. My name is Bai Jie," the shifty-eyed sword mistress answered subconsciously. "Oh, why are you pretending to be a sword mistress?" Guhan asked again. "Oh, because..." Bai Jie immediately raised his head in panic and yelled, "No, I'm not pretending to be a sword mistress. I'm a real sword mistress. Don't slander me." Guhan snorted coldly. "Fine. Since you said that you're the sword bearer and this sword maiden is your sword bearer, you can take this little girl back." "You really want me to take it back?" Bai Jie hurriedly stepped forward, wanting to take the young lady behind Qing Pin away. "Wait, who told you to do it yourself?" Guhan waved his hand. "Who told you to do it yourself? Don't you even know how to summon the sword maiden? With just a thought, your sword maiden will automatically fly back into your hands. Why do you have to work so hard yourself?" Bai Jie was instantly drenched in sweat as he stood rooted to the spot, unable to move. 10 seconds later, he raised his head with difficulty and revealed an angry expression. "Who's listening to you? Do you think that whatever you say is right? I'm not going to listen to you. Just you wait, I'm going to complain to the discipline committee right now. Stay here and don't move. Wait for me to bring the discipline committee member over." Bai Jie threatened and took a few steps back. It sounded like he was going to complain to the discipline committee, but only the heavens knew if he was actually trying to escape or something. "Why do you have to go through so much trouble by walking over? Can't you just use the sword bearer's personal terminal? The discipline committee's reporting number is on the front page of the sword bearer's personal terminal. You just have to tap on it, and the discipline committee member will naturally come over." "Don't tell me you've forgotten about that," Guhan said calmly. "Forget it. In case you say that you don't want to listen to me, I'll just call the discipline committee. Oh right, I can also ask the discipline committee what kind of punishment they'll receive for pretending to be a sword bearer." With that, Guhan pretended to open his personal terminal to call the discipline committee. "I can't wait any longer. I'll go look for the discipline committee myself." Bai Jie shuddered and threw out these dry words. He pushed through the crowd and ran outside. Judging by his speed, he was almost as fast as Usain Bolt from 1,000 years ago. "Hey, what are you guys still standing there for? Hurry up and arrest him." Seeing that Bai Jie had already run far away and the policemen around him were still indifferent, Guhan helplessly shouted at the policeman. "Oh! What? After him!" The policemen snapped out of their daze. Even an idiot could tell that they had just been fooled by this brat called Bai Jie. They were instantly enraged. They could cower in front of a sword-bearer, but how could they cower in front of a mere liar? More than 10 policemen ran in the direction of Bai Jie's escape. Although these policemen weren't very smart, they still had basic police skills. Under the command of the captain, more than 10 policemen split up from 4 to 5 directions and started to surround and intercept the escaping Bai Jie. After more than 10 minutes of cat and mouse, Bai Jie, whose limbs were limp, was pressed to the ground by 2 policemen and escorted back to the crime scene, which was next to Guhan. During this period of pursuit, Guhan also communicated with Qing Pin to understand the basic situation of the matter. It turned out that when Guhan was in a daze, no matter how much he teased Guhan, he didn't get a response. Bored and a little angry, Qing Pin suddenly noticed some movement in the forest in the distance. Curious, Qing Pin ran over to take a look and saw a scene that made Qing Pin explode in anger. The shifty-eyed Bai Jie was holding a whip in his hand and was constantly lashing it at a girl who looked even smaller than Qing Pin. This Bai Jie was even unbuckling his belt and taking off his pants. No one knew what he was going to do. Of course, Qing Pin, who was bursting with a sense of justice, wouldn't let this bad guy do such a thing in front of him. So, he waved his Qing Pin sword and charged out while shouting, "Bad guy, pervert." Bai Jie was shocked. Even though Qing Pin was just a young lowly, this coward didn't dare to make a move when he saw the sword in Qing Pin's hand. It was only when Qing Pin dragged the girl away that he let out a strange cry. At this time, Two policemen happened to pass by. So, Bai Jie used his identity as a sword-bearer to say that his sword lady had been kidnapped and asked the policeman to rescue her. These policemen were all newbies. When they saw the sword-bearer's personal terminal, they were confused and followed Bai Jie's instructions to his teammates to chase after Qing Pin. Under the pursuit of these policemen, the pitiful and petite Qing Pin could only drag the girl who wasn't much smaller than him and run everywhere. When they finally reached this alley, the girl who was covered in cuts and bruises suddenly fainted. Qing Pin had no choice but to be stopped by the policeman and Bai Jie. What happened next was witnessed by Gu Han. Gu Han, Qing Pin did the right thing, didn't he? Hurry up and praise Qing Pin. Hurry up and praise him. Qing Pin sat on Gu Han's neck and quickly knocked on Gu Han's head like a drum. He was trying to get Gu Han to praise him. Qing Pin was also a good kid who liked to be praised. You still want me to praise you? You only know how to run around and make me look for you. Can't you run to my side and ask me to protect you? Gu Han patted Qing Pin's calves that were hanging on his head. If I didn't come in time, you would have been in big trouble. Stinky Gu Han, you were in a daze just now. Qing Pin's throat is hoarse from all the shouting and my hands are hurting, but you ignored Qing Pin. Qing Pin won't ask for your help, Qing Pin complained coquettishly. Sigh, even his complaining tone was so cute. Mr. Gu Han, we've caught this stupid thief. At that moment, the police captain grabbed Bai Jie, who was tightly bound by the beam handcuffs, and dragged him over. He pushed him to the ground in front of Gu Han. The swordsman, who was so powerful just a moment ago, was now lying in front of Ji Yu Han like a dead dog. Looking at the scars on his face, it seemed like he had been beaten up by the police to vent his anger. Sir, I didn't know this was your sword lady. Sir, please let me go like you're playing a song. Bai Jie knelt in front of Gu Han and wailed. He looked like a pitiful worm who had lost everything after losing his disguise. Let me ask you, what's your relationship with this little girl? Why are you torturing her like this? Gu Han asked Bai Jie in a condescending manner. Sir, I don't know her. I just saw her walking on the street alone and thought she was lost, so I wanted to tease her. Sir, I was wrong. I was lustful. Please forgive me, sir, Bai Jie begged. Then how did you get the personal terminal of the swordsman? Gu Han asked again. Oh, I modified it myself. This was originally an ordinary personal terminal. I just found some materials and modified it myself. Sir, I really made a mistake. Sir, I'm a good person. Trash. Gu Han cursed and gestured to the police captain. Sir, I'll leave this person to you. I'm not interested in dealing with trash like him. Understood. The police captain nodded quickly, indicating that he would do as he was told. We're leaving too. Gu Han patted Qing Pin's calf, indicating that it was time for him to leave. No, Gu Han, what about her if we leave? Qing Pin pointed at the little girl and begged cutely, she's so pitiful. Gu Han, can we save her? Aren't the police here? The police will save her. Ji Yu Han didn't even look at the little girl. If it wasn't for the fact that she was poor, he wouldn't even be interested in exposing Bai Jie. Lady Sword, don't worry. We'll definitely take good care of this little girl. We'll even help you find her family. Don't worry, we're the people's police, and the people's police serve the people. With that, the two police officers picked up the little girl on the ground and prepared to bring her back to the police station. Oh. Qing Pin seemed to have a good impression of the little girl. Seeing that Gu Han was not going to help, she was a little upset. Gu Han turned around to comfort her, then subconsciously glanced at the little girl. At that moment, the little girl was in the police officer's arms. Her little face was on the police officer's shoulder, and her face was facing Gu Han's eyes. Smack. Gu Han, who saw the little girl's face for the first time, accidentally dropped Qing Pin to the ground. Chapter 228. Captain, I'm taking this person with me. Ji Yu Han hugged the young girl who was covered in wounds and tenderly held her in his arms, not willing to let go. For some unknown reason, Ji Yu Han actually changed his attitude of disdain towards this young girl in an instant. I don't think that's appropriate. The captain frowned. According to the law, we, the police, should be responsible for the affairs of ordinary people. We should take care of this girl and help her find her family. She's not a girl. She's a sword mistress. Guhan glared at the captain. The captain was so scared that he took a few steps back. He thought to himself, this person's eyes are so scary. I only took a glance and I felt the aura of death. Since she's a sword mistress, we, the sword mistress, will be responsible for her. Qingpin, let's go. Ji Han then casually picked up the poor man on the ground and stuffed him into the infant nurturing pouch on his chest, then left in a cloud of dust. Sir, why did you take her away? How are we going to write the report? I can't explain it to the higher-ups. The captain was about to cry when he saw Guhan leaving. The report is your business, not mine. If you don't know how to write it, just report it to the higher-ups. I can't be bothered with you. Don't worry. Even if you report it to the higher-ups, I won't take revenge on you. Guhan said and disappeared completely. F***ck, I think this guy probably fell for the girl's beauty. He's just like Bai Jie, a pervert. What a scum, a beast. None of the sword mistresses are good people. If it wasn't for the fact that humans need their protection, I could have killed him with a single shot. The captain spat on the ground after he saw Guhan disappear. This was all he could do. He didn't have the guts to do anything else. Captain, what should we do? How should we write the report? A few policemen came over and asked their captain bitterly. What else can we do? Of course, we'll make it up. The captain said impatiently. Just say that Bai Jie kidnapped the girl and was exposed by the sword mistress, Guhan. Just write it like this. But, what if the parents of the girl who was taken away come and ask us for the child? A policeman scratched his head. Just tell them that the sword mistress took a liking to the child and took her home to be her disciple. If they have the ability, they can ask the sword mistress for the child themselves. The captain continued to make up a story. Captain, isn't this too unconscionable? A policeman touched his conscience. He felt that this was completely against his original intention of being a police officer. Didn't you hear the sword mistress say that I won't take revenge on you? The police captain rolled his eyes at his subordinates. He's telling us that if this matter gets out, he won't even give us a chance to retaliate in secret. We'll be dead on the spot. By and God, what is this? Why the sword mistress never picked me when I was young? You're such a snob. You're such a sword mistress. Phut, although this incident was eventually covered up by the police officers and was not made public, no family member of the girl had ever come looking for the girl. So, it was hidden deep in their hearts. Until one day, when they watched the news broadcast, they found out the final outcome of Ji Han and the little girl. Then, they were dumbfounded, filled with emotions, and deeply ridiculed. I can't believe I actually spoke with Jendi. My ancestors must be so lucky. Guhan placed the little girl in the medical pod. The girl's injuries were all external, so there was no need for her to go to a hospital. She only needed to stay in the medical pod for a while to heal. In fact, taking the little girl to a hospital was the best choice. There might be some injuries that the medical pod could not detect and treat, and they would need professional doctors and medical equipment to treat them. However, Guhan had just checked the little girl's body and found that she did not have a personal terminal on her. This was very inconceivable. Every human being was implanted with a personal terminal chip the moment they were born. Then, they would wear a personal terminal on their arm that was fused with their skin. If a person did not have a personal terminal, they would not be able to survive in the base city. All transactions and living conditions required a personal terminal as an intermediary. There was only one kind of woman in this base who did not have a personal terminal, and that was the sword mistress. Only a sword mistress did not need a personal terminal. However, Guhan had just checked the girl's body. She had blood, flesh, and internal organs. The medical pod scanned her, and it showed that she was a normal human. There was nothing abnormal. If she was a sword mistress, just one point was enough to prove her identity. Sword mistresses did not have blood. Then, a very interesting thing happened. This girl was not a sword mistress, but she did not have a personal terminal. Combined with her shocking appearance, Guhan had a shocking guess. This girl was probably his biological sister, Ji Yoon, who had been resurrected. Yes, at first glance, Ji Yoon recognized this girl. She had the exact same appearance as his younger sister, Ji Yoon. Just like that moment 12 years ago when he was frozen in sorrow, this girl was his younger sister, Ji Yoon, whom he had never forgotten. Of course, Guhan knew that this was unbelievable, like a fantasy story, but the truth was right there. His parents and sister who had bid farewell to him in the dream, proving that their souls had always been by his side. She looked exactly like his sister. She did not have a personal terminal, and her body appeared in this world out of thin air. All of this was too much of a coincidence. It was so coincidental that Guhan had to believe that this girl was his sister, Ji Yoon. Could it be that someone specially thought of a way to enter my dream and create such a realistic dream? Then, they created or had plastic surgery to create a girl who looked exactly like my sister. Finally, they took away the personal terminal that could prove the girl's identity, just to deceive me. That's impossible. I'm not worth someone's effort. Guhan shook his head. It was impossible. Even if all of this was true, so what? Looking at his sister's appearance, Guhan felt at ease. Oh well, I'll wait until she wakes up. During this whole process, he called Ji Yoon. Let's call her Ji Yoon for now. After placing Ji Yoon in the medical pod, Guhan knelt beside the medical pod and looked at his sister through the transparent glass. He did not move for a long time. Master, it's time to eat. The food has been reheated 3 times. Outside the door, when Mayun, who was holding the reheated food 3 times, looked at Guhan's attentive expression. She could not help but feel curious. Who was this girl lying in the medical pod? She could actually make her master act in a way that she had never seen before. If when Mayun was only a little curious, then there was a little fellow who was a little angry. She felt that her position was deeply threatened. Guhan, Qingpin will give you some meat. An oily little hand was placed on Guhan's neck. Then, a large piece of pork was sent to Guhan's mouth and hit his tightly closed teeth. Guhan turned his head and saw Qingpin looking at him with a serious expression. He kept trying to open Guhan's tightly closed teeth and send the pork into Guhan's mouth. Seeing this scene, Guhan's heart warmed. He opened his mouth and allowed Qingpin to send a large piece of dongpa meat and a small part of his palm into Guhan's mouth. Then, his mouth suddenly closed. Ouch! Qingpin cried. This annoying Guhan eating meat was fine, but he actually ate his palm. This made Qingpin a little distressed. Could it be that Guhan wanted to bite off his palm and eat it? If his palm was really eaten, what should he do? How should he eat meat in the future? Was he going to let Guhan feed him for the rest of his life? Thinking of this, it was not bad to let Guhan eat his palm. Unfortunately, Guhan did not eat Qingpin's palm into his stomach. Instead, like eating a lollipop, he licked Qingpin's little hand carefully. He licked the oil stains on the little hand into his stomach. Then, he spat out Qingpin's palm. Aya, this Guhan's licking is so comfortable. It's over. Guhan's licking is so comfortable that I'm addicted to this comfortable feeling. If he doesn't lick me like this in the future, then wouldn't I be like a poor kitten or puppy? Qingpin thought in a mess. Unknowingly, he was picked up by Guhan. Mayun, you take care of Ji Yoon. You must take good care of her. Don't let her get hurt again. Do you understand? Guhan twisted his stiff neck and handed the task of taking care of Ji Yoon to Wen Mayun. I'm going to take a bath. Qingpin made my neck full of oil stains. Guhan, Qingpin also wants to take a bath with you. Qingpin suddenly said such a sentence. This was not Qingpin's request to take a bath with Guhan, but Guhan had never agreed to this request. But this time, Guhan actually agreed for the first time. Okay, today we'll take a bath together as a pair of good friends. Wow. Really? Qingpin couldn't believe his ears. Guhan, are you really willing to take a bath with Qingpin? Yes, Guhan agrees, Guhan replied readily. Guhan, did you reward Qingpin because he did a good deed today? Qingpin helped Guhan find the most important person today. Today, all of Qingpin's requests, Guhan will agree to Guhan's request. Then Qingpin hopes that Guhan and Qingpin will always be together and place Qingpin in his heart. Will Guhan also agree to Qingpin's request? Of course, Qingpin will always be Guhan's heart. No one can separate us. Even if it's a desolate grade yuan coup, Guhan will kill him for you to see. Chapter 229. Mr. Luo, why isn't your class moving yet? The other classes have already set off. At the entrance of Yuzhong University, Guhan and the other students of class 22694 lined up in a rather neat line. They were silently waiting for their homeroom teacher, Luo Fan, to announce the time to set off. That day was the first day that class 22694 would go out of the city for actual combat training. Early in the morning, all the students gathered at the entrance of the school. They were only waiting for their homeroom teacher, Luo Fan, to leave the base city for the first time in their lives. They would head to the perilous outskirts of the base city and engage in a real battle with those yuan coups. They could lose their lives at any time. However, it was already past the time to set off, but the line still remained at the entrance of the school. This was a very rare thing. In the history of Yuzhong University, such a thing rarely happened. That was why a supervisor specifically came to question Luo Fan. Why wasn't he moving? Supervisor, there are still students in our class who haven't arrived yet. We can't set off. Luo Fan spread his hands, indicating that he had no solution. Mr. Luo, you're not a newbie. When has our Yuzhong University ever had a tradition of waiting for students who are late? Set off now. As for the student who is late, I'll wait for him here. I'll let him know what Yuzhong University's rules are, the supervisor said angrily. Half of this anger was directed at the student who was late and the other half at Luo Fan. Luo Fan was a qualified teacher. How could he make such a serious mistake? Since when did Yuzhong University need to care about a student's actions? I'm sorry, Mr. Supervisor. I can't afford to offend this student. If she doesn't arrive, I'm afraid our class 22694 won't be able to move a single step. Luo Fan glanced at the supervisor. Mr. Supervisor, I won't harm you. Contact the principal yourself and you'll know why I don't dare to move. I really have to wait until she arrives. Even if she comes in the afternoon, I want to wait until the afternoon. This is the principal's idea. After hearing Luo Fan's words, the supervisor was shocked. There was actually the principal's intention in this. This student could actually make the principal give such instructions that went against the school rules. How deep was the water in this matter? At this time, two graceful figures gradually walked over from not far away. Luo Fan let out a long sigh of relief. This little devil had finally arrived. He patted the supervisor on the shoulder and said, "Supervisor, my student has arrived. Class 22694 will set off now." Hearing Luo Fan's words, the supervisor looked over. It turned out that the student who caught the principal's attention was a girl. The supervisor sized her up carefully. This girl's looks were average. She didn't seem to have any special temperament. She was just like a loser. However, the sword lady behind the girl was a stunning beauty. Her white dress fluttered in the wind, and she looked like a girl who walked out of an ink painting passed down from ancient times. Wait, why did this sword lady look so familiar? He felt like he had seen her somewhere before. The supervisor hurriedly opened his personal terminal and flipped through all the information of the ancient sword-grade sword ladies. He flipped through the pictures of the top 200 sword ladies, but he didn't find a picture of this sword lady. The supervisor thought about it and decided to give it a try. He flipped through the pictures of the treasured sword-grade sword lady. In the end, when he flipped to the third picture, he saw this sword lady in white. Beside her was the information of the sword lady, treasured sword-grade sword lady Tianwen sword, third place in the treasured sword record. It's actually the sword lady Tianwen sword, third place in the treasured sword grade. I heard from my friends in the sword pavilion that one of the treasured sword grade treasures, the natural sword lady Tianwen sword, had been coordinated away by someone. Could it be that it was taken away by this student? The supervisor mumbled to himself. Suddenly, The supervisor's expression changed drastically. I remember that Class 22694 was established 2 weeks ago, and the earliest sword bearers in it were only 3 weeks ago. Could it be that this female student only used 3 weeks to become a sword bearer? Could it be that this female student only used 3 weeks to become a sword bearer? That's too exaggerated. I spent 3 whole years to complete this progress. After being stunned for a long time, the supervisor finally accepted this fact. He then shook his head in a self-deprecating manner and left the school gate. Becoming a treasured sword grade sword bearer in 3 weeks and synchronizing the natural sword lady, who ranked 3rd in the treasured sword grade, naturally made the principal and Luo Fan treat her like a treasure. So what if she was late? Even if she beat him up, the principal would probably pinch his nose and accept it. This was the world of sword bearers. Although it seemed to be full of order, it was still a world where strength spoke the loudest. But then again, there was not a single world in the universe where strength spoke the loudest. Teacher, aren't we going out of the city? Why are we going to the core area instead? After following the class for a long time, a student raised a question. They did not seem to be on the path out of the city. We have to go to the service center for sword bearers first to handle some necessary procedures for you brats. At the same time, I'll tell you the rules of life for sword bearers. Luo Fan said with a laugh as he walked to the sword bearers mission center of the service center. Brats, welcome to the sword bearers mission center. But that's the official name. We sword bearers like to call this place the Mercenary Hall. Luo Fan laughed heartily as he pushed open the so-called Mercenary Hall. This hall had a Western fantasy feel to it. In an instant, a loud noise rushed into the ears of Guhan and the others. The hall was densely packed with people. A rough estimate estimated that there were at least 500 to 600 people in this hall. According to the rules, those who were not swordbearers were not qualified to enter the Swordbearers Mission Center, but these 500 to 600 people were all swordbearers. This was the first time Ji Yu Han had seen so many real swordbearers in real life. This was probably the hall with the most swordbearers in Yuzhang City. On both sides of the hall, there were countless display screens. Missions kept appearing and disappearing on the screens. At the bottom of the screens, dozens of windows opened at the same time. Each window had 2 to 3 staff members in charge of receiving the sword bearers. Each window seemed to be extremely busy. Yo, old Luo, you brought a bunch of newbies with you. You have a lot of work ahead of you. A few sword bearers who were familiar with Luo Fan came up to greet Luo Fan. Damn, thanks to you, I'm about to die from being busy. Luo Fan punched the man's chest and started chatting with him in high spirits. Guhan, Teacher Luo looks very familiar here. Song Hammer whispered into Guhan's ear as she saw people coming out of the mission hall to greet Luo Fan. That's normal. As Yuzhang University's homeroom teacher, Teacher Luo comes to the mercenary hall at least 3 times a week. How could he not be familiar with these sword bearers? Liuonian Ling came up to Guhan and took the initiative to explain. On the other side, Luo Fan was still chatting with his friends. Hey, old Luo, isn't the class in your hands about to graduate? How about giving me a few people? You don't know this, but last week, we encountered a wild Ultraman and 3 people died. Now, we can't even assemble a sword formation. If you don't help me, my team will have to disband. The person who was talking to Luo Fan was the leader of a team of sword bearers. From what he said, it seemed like he had encountered an Ultraman when he was adventuring outside the city. Generally speaking, Ultramans were dragon level or above. Yuan Ku being able to escape safely was already a very good achievement. Forget it, my class graduated last month. This group of people are all newbies who have just become sword bearers. If they join your team, they won't even know how they died. Luo Fan rejected his friend's request and returned to the team. He then led the 30 people from class 22694 into the mission hall for sword bearers. Listen carefully to what I'm going to say next. If anything goes wrong, you'll be the one to suffer. It has nothing to do with me. Luo Fan paused for a moment. As sword bearers, I believe that you've all enjoyed treatment that surpasses ordinary people and enjoyed the status of a superior person in the past 2 weeks. However, You didn't earn this status. It's given to you by the sword bearer's badge that you're wearing. It's given to you by the sword bearer's duty to protect the survival of mankind. If you can't fulfill your duty, then you'll be kicked out of the sword bearer's team without hesitation. Although you've received your personal terminal, it's complete. Some of its functions are still sealed. Later, I'll bring you to open the window and unlock all the functions of your personal terminal. Then, you'll truly become a sword bearer, or more accurately, a sword bearer mercenary. Your employer isn't me or anyone else, but the Sword Committee and the entire human race that hired you. After the official opening and unlocking, you'll automatically receive 100 hero coins. What are hero coins? To put it bluntly, hero coins are also a type of money. However, they're different from RMB, which is used by ordinary people. Hero coins are coins that can only be used by sword bearers. In fact, the various privileges that you've enjoyed in the past 2 weeks, such as the citizen quota, the residence in the core area, the personal maid, the RMB subsidy, and even the arrogance that you've shown in front of ordinary people, aren't free. They're all bought with hero coins. As an ancient sword bearer, the Sword Committee will charge you 50 hero coins every month for the privileges that you've enjoyed. You can think of it as a tax. You should know that the hero coins you have now will only last you for 2 months. After 2 months, your hero coins will be used up. When that time comes, all the privileges that you've enjoyed will be taken away. You might even be chased out of the core area along with your parents and sent back to the overcrowded honeycomb house. If you don't want to go back to the past, then you'd better buck up and summon your courage. There are more than enough missions in the mercenary hall for you. As long as you complete them, tens, hundreds, or even thousands of hero coins won't be a problem. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,